Good evening and welcome to The Proof is Out There. Our first story comes from our neighbors up in Canada, and it may be one of the most famous UFO cases in the Great White North's history. It's an incident that stumped ufologists and even the Canadian government for more than 50 years. Now it's our turn to take it on. September 1st, 1974, Langenburg, Saskatchewan, Canada. It's mid-morning, and 36-year-old farmer Edwin Fuhr is working his land when he says he notices 5 saucer-shaped objects spinning by the edge of his field. After about 15 minutes, Edwin says they shoot into the sky and disappear. When he approaches the area, he finds this. Photographs show a ring of flattened swamp grass encircling a patch of upright, apparently untouched grass at the center. There are 5 rings in all, each measuring between 10 and 12 feet across. Overnight, Edwin and his photos become international sensations, and officials took the sighting so seriously that it became one of the most documented UFO cases in Canadian history.
This incident was reported to local law enforcement. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, actually investigated this, and they could not say conclusively that this was a hoax.
The RCMP report characterized Edwin as a reliable individual, and further testing also seemed to support his account.
There were soil samples obtained immediately after the incident. Upon further examination, they apparently were able to isolate a black substance that appeared to them, at least superficially, as being burnt by some sort of heat source.
Sound alien? Many people think so. But not everything that comes from the sky and leaves a mark is from another world.
I remember reading a historical report from the early 1970s where in the Midwest we were testing a particular rocket. The launch went perfectly. You had booster separation, and one of the rings to the rocket engine was naturally very hot. And when it landed, it actually scorched the earth and started a fire in a farmer's field.
When word of Edwin's sighting got out, thousands flocked to his farm. A plane even landed in a neighboring field to get a closer look. Was his damaged property a UFO landing site or something else? The horizontal landing and takeoff of a conventional aircraft clearly wouldn't leave a circular imprint like we see here. So we first ask if this could have been caused by a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
The U.S. and the British had the Harrier jump jet, which were vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, but they're jet engines, so they would have burnt the grass right off the bat and would have probably burnt most of the bushes in the area. Not just the soil. 2, it wouldn't leave a circular impression.
Then what about space junk from a rocket? In 2024, parts of a SpaceX rocket were found by a Canadian farmer. So it still happens. But no debris was found on Edward Fuhr's property, just those weird circles.
When you look at images like this, our mind harkens back to all the crop circles we see around the world.
Now, crop circles are large-scale radial patterns made of flattened crops. They popped up across England in the mid to late 20th century. While many assume they were marks made by UFOs, the evidence suggests otherwise.
Usually what we'll see is someone physically went and stepped on the grass with planks of wood on their feet. And they measured it out with ropes and just kind of drew out some kind of symbology.
But the Langenburg circles are different. They lack that precise geometry, which is the telltale sign of human handiwork. Instead, these rings have a soft, wind-swept shape.
When you look at a flying saucer, you can imagine that spinning rapidly, it could have some type of effect on the grasses here.
And there's that strange soil sample, which contained an anomalous black precipitate that scientists could never explain.
The rest of the soil samples in the field, they turned up normal. It's just the soil samples where the circles were that showed up as abnormal or inconclusive.
We don't know the answer. If Edwin Fuhr is to be believed, it was real.
Our verdict? Possible UFO. The case has become so famous in Canada that it's earned its very own commemorative coin from the Canadian Royal Mint. Not a bad way to be remembered. Okay, Let's pivot now from Canada to Turkey. There is an ancient Turkish legend that speaks of a mythical lake monster. It's captured the imagination of locals for centuries, and now one of the locals may have captured it on video. June 1997, Lake Van, Turkey, about 500 miles east of the Turkish capital, Ankara. A teaching assistant from Van University named Unal Kozak has set up a camera by the lake's shore. His mission? To capture evidence of a strange creature that has been rumored to inhabit these waters. After filming nothing of significance, Kozak is about to call it a day when his luck unexpectedly changes. A creature of seemingly massive proportions emerges from the surface of the lake. It appears to have textured copper-colored skin, and a small group of bubbles percolates from beneath, potentially indicating a mouth or blowhole of some sort. Let's take a closer look. We see these bubbles, these percolating bubbles, which suggests this whole section could be the creature's head. And some believe that this right here could even be the creature's eye.
We have actually so much detail available to us here. This appears to be an eye in the head. Other parts of the body sort of trailing behind. So it does seem to be kind of a very long creature.
The lake itself can reach depths of nearly 1,500 feet. And even though it's not connected to any ocean, the water is salty, really salty. It's what's known as a soda lake, an extreme environment where high evaporation rates drastically increase salt levels. In fact, Lake Van is the largest soda lake in the world, with water so rich in sodium carbonate that only 2 types of fish currently live there, and perhaps one venerable aquatic monster. A monster who may have been terrorizing people since the 10th century.
A primordial castle actually displays an engraving of what appears to be some type of sea dragon. And an Ottoman newspaper from 1889 actually published a story about 3 men who were camping alongside Lake Van when this terrible sea beast came out of the waters and attacked one of the men and attempted to drag him into the depths.
It was this reportedly violent behavior that had many wondering if this creature could be a relic plesiosaur, the Triassic sea creature known for viciously ambushing its prey from below.
When you look at all the evidence and the sheer number of reports that date back centuries, it leads one to believe that there most certainly might be some type of mystery to be uncovered in Lake Van.
It's safe to say Lake Van contains several submerged secrets. In 2017, a team of divers discovered a 3,000-year-old castle impeccably preserved in the alkaline water, as well as a boat which disappeared back in 1948. Could the murky waters also be hiding a giant lake monster? Let's see what our experts think.
This definitely looks like something that's moving up and down in the water. What's really striking is you see some kind of bubbles coming from the front of this. It looks like a living, breathing animal to me.
Many local universities have tried and failed to debunk the myth of this monster. So is it possible that this is some surviving plesiosaur?
The plesiosaur isn't too far off of a guess because it did inhabit saltwater many millions of years ago. However, unlike Loch Ness, which is connected to the ocean by a series of rivers, Lake Van is much more isolated. So I don't see any way that a large animal can move in and out of this body of water very easily. Whatever is in this lake is essentially stuck there, and it would likely be seen much more often.
Our experts also believe that due to the mineral composition of the lake itself, most documented animals wouldn't be able to survive there.
Lake Van has a high density of salt, and even the sediment at the bottom is salty, which makes it really difficult for life to persist.
Basically nothing can survive there besides a few small fish that have been recorded. So if something is there, it would have to have developed some sort of adaptation to process salinity a lot better than any other animal we know.
Impossible? Before you jump to that conclusion, remember, nature often finds a way.
There's a lot of incredible animals that have adapted to extremely high saltwater situations, including animals that can live at saltwater concentrations of up to 50%. So if this were a type of animal that we're seeing, it would have to have an entirely different biology than anything that we really understand. I do think this is biological, but I can't tell you exactly what we're looking at.
Our verdict? Unknown biological specimen. We believe that the subject of this video is a genuine mystery. Perhaps the creature has evolved to survive in these extreme conditions. With that said, there's not enough evidence in this video to confirm or discount centuries of lore. Is it possible to withstand extreme physical pain, from a burning flame no less, using only the power of the mind? This next video may provide the answer, but we can already say this much. Do not try this at home. October 24th, 2015. We're near the town of Peace River in Alberta, Canada. Doug Thompson is in his garage, about to do something extreme.
Today, I'm gonna extinguish a cutting torch on my tongue. Acetylene, oxygen, with a temperature ranging from 5,900 degrees to 6,300 degrees Fahrenheit. World's hottest flame, first person to do this.
Doug draws the flame to his mouth, then he snuffs it out with his tongue. Let's watch that again from a different angle and slow down. Man, that's gotta burn.
There's two types of torch. In the sideshow world, you'll see propane and oxygen, and acetylene and oxygen. Acetylene is more dangerous than propane because it's highly reactive. It's highly explosive.
The spectacle of fire eating dates back thousands of years, spanning several cultural and artistic traditions, from the fakir mystics of India to today's carnival sideshows. This engraving from the 19th century captures Englishman Robert Powell, a performer known for swallowing not only fire, but also red-hot coals and brimstone.
My understanding is most fire eaters do something at the temperature of 1,000 to 1,200 degrees, and this guy is doing several times hotter than that? Is he doing this with mind over matter? Is this some kind of innate superhuman ability that he has?
And is it possible that innate superhuman ability is something anyone can tap into?
One of the infamous Watergate plumbers, G. Gordon Liddy, was once seen holding his hand over a lit candle until his skin burned. Someone said, "What's the trick?" And he said, "The trick is not minding." Is it possible that you could put yourself in extreme situations and be feeling extreme pain, but not minding at all?
But don't think everyone who plays with fire can withstand the burn. During a team building event in Switzerland, dozens of employees were injured doing a firewalk on 1,000-degree coals.
Moments after the firewalking was completed, dozens of employees complained of pain and burns. There definitely were injuries, and people were sent to the hospital.
This isn't the first superhuman feat with heat. In a past episode, we saw a man in India dipping his bare hand in boiling oil with no reaction. In that case, our experts concluded we were witnessing acquired pain immunity. Is this what's happening with Doug? First question for our experts. Are we simply seeing an unusual tolerance for pain?
People have varying thresholds for pain. Congenital insensitivity to pain is a very rare condition where these individuals cannot feel any pain or temperature from birth. There's a lot of techniques that people can use to help minimize pain. Applying heat or ice will help decrease pain. There are relaxation and meditation techniques like breathing and yoga to help relax the muscles, which can minimize pain.
But in the video, Doug isn't in a meditative state, and he's not using ice or anything else. So if the secret to pulling off this jaw-dropping fire stunt isn't in the performer, maybe it's in the flame. Is Doug's torch as hot as he claims?
In the video, the flames were blue-colored, meaning that it was very, very hot, thousands of degrees. How is it possible that your tongue can withstand temperatures thousands of degrees? Well, there's something called the Leidenfrost effect.
The Leidenfrost effect occurs when a liquid comes into contact with a solid that's hotter than the liquid's boiling point. Upon contact, a layer of vapor forms, creating an insulating barrier between the liquid and the solid.
And that's what's happening here. When he puts that thing in his mouth, the saliva then turns to steam, and steam insulates him from the temperatures that are thousands of degrees, and as a consequence, he's able to choke off the air supply and extinguish the flame. And again, don't try this at home.
When I do it, I have to extinguish it in my mouth for a whole second. I have to hold it with as much pressure as I can so it doesn't auto-reignite in my mouth.
Our verdict? Leidenfrost effect. Our torch eater, Doug Thompson, has his doubts, saying the acetylene torch he uses can burn underwater. But we're going with Professor Kaku on this one. Man, I've heard that some people like it hot, but Doug, you're taking it to the next level. The Mogollons were a Native American people who lived in what is today southern New Mexico and Arizona. But some wonder if there is something roaming their former territories that may not be human. It's May 14th, 2023. It's a sunny spring day on the Mogollon Rim in Arizona. Bigfoot researcher Tony Roulan is hiking along one of the many picturesque rocky trails when he suddenly hears an eerie sound. He quickly pulls out a recording device and captures this. Several howls can be heard. The first are prolonged and deep. Then, scattered, high-pitched yips. Many believe these sounds could be connected to a monstrous legend from this area.
When people encounter Sasquatches, they very often slap a name on it. And the local name in Arizona is the Mogollon Monster, named after the Mogollon Rim, which is a huge geologic formation that separates the desert areas in the south. One of the earliest written reports from this area is from the Arizona Republican newspaper in 1903. They kind of exaggerate human descriptions to fit a monstrous type animal. Long, shaggy, light-colored hair with a big beard and long claws.
Some have suggested that this elusive creature could be inhabiting the same caves that were once used by the Mogollon tribes during the late 13th century.
There's a good reason to think that Sasquatches are using caves to avoid the harshest of weathers. And in Arizona, that could really be 120 or more degrees.
The overlapping sounds in the recording suggest that what we are hearing is a group of creatures. And an alleged Sasquatch family may have been documented in this very same area not long ago.
In 2015, automatic cameras from the Arizona Department of Transportation may have actually filmed a family of these things.
You can see in the photo what appears to be 6 blurry figures traversing alongside the SR 260 highway. The photo triggered an online debate amongst Bigfoot believers.
Like every other perfectly normal species of animal, they breed and they have families and young ones and they grow up and die, etc. We find footprints from juveniles on a pretty regular basis. It is not an individual. That would be ridiculous. And Bigfoots are not ridiculous.
Wild animals like wolves typically howl to signal their positions, call the pack to assemble, or note their territory. So could there be a group of Mogollon monsters out there trying to tell each other or us something? Let's ask the experts. According to our experts, this sound is consistent with that of a primate, albeit a smaller one.
I was struck upon listening to this by its remarkable similarity to gibbon's song.
Gibbons produce such a boisterous sound by using an inflatable throat sac, which amplifies sound through air pathways the way a trumpet does. So are they gibbons that escaped from a zoo?
The character of these very short duration sounds that the gibbon would make are quite a bit different than the Mogollon sound.
But how about Sasquatch? We test our sound against another respected alleged Sasquatch recording, the Ohio Howls.
The contour is similar. The fundamental frequency is much lower. I don't think we can use the Ohio sounds as a possible source for comparison to the Mogollon sounds.
Then what could be responsible for these strange sounds?
Another animal that might be present is a coyote. And coyotes are known to have a howl in the same frequency range as the Mogollon recording. So they are overlapping in that frequency range. And because the Mogollon recording sounds like a call and response may be taking place, a coyote would be a very likely source of the sounds that we hear in the Mogollon recording.
While I personally love the idea of adventurous gibbons running around the rocky trails of the Southwest, we have to agree this is nothing more than a communication between coyotes. But hang on. Back in 2014, a young woman reported seeing the Mogollon monster drinking from a stream in nearby Payson, Arizona. So it could still be out there somewhere. The Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office investigates unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, what the rest of us call UFOs. But did you know that USOs, or unidentified submerged objects, have also been making waves in official circles? This next video might give you an idea why. June 2023, the Gulf of Mexico. On a cruise ship heading back to Galveston from the Bahamas, Jeremy Teague has just finished eating dinner with his family.
It was close to 7:45, 8 o'clock, and the captain comes on and says, we have to turn around. Our spotter spotted something in the ocean, and, you know, by law, we have to go and check it out.
A small blue light pops up from beneath the waves. It appears to have a bright spot in the middle that shifts, almost as if looking around.
Everybody is not quite in a panic, but you could hear the murmurings around me. We really didn't know what it was at the time.
On a whim, Jeremy posts his footage to TikTok, and it instantly goes viral, amassing more than 1 million views in the first week alone.
Comments were all over the place, like unidentified sea creatures. Maybe it was something that had crashed into the ocean, and was it an alien aircraft?
The theories come as no surprise, considering the area's history with USOs.
The Gulf of Mexico and the neighboring Caribbean Sea have become fairly notorious for UFOs that are able to traverse through water and air fairly seamlessly. Perhaps most notable was the object recorded in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. The object was filmed by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol back in 2013, and what makes the video interesting is that the object in the video seemingly travels from the air, dives into the water, and then reemerges back out with great ease.
More than a decade later, the identity of the Aguadilla USO is still hotly debated, with the Pentagon declaring it debunked, while many others maintain that it is still an anomaly. In the meantime, more USO sightings have continued to crop up in the area ever since, like one recent sighting off the coast of Florida.
According to one man's account, a research vessel in 2024 spotted a strange light in the water, but the scientists couldn't ascertain what this object was. When this account was posted online, many people began to assume that this was a USO, very similar to the one seen in Jeremy's video.
Another possibility is that Jeremy's cruise ship, may have crossed paths with a bit of aquatic espionage.
A semi-sub is an autonomous drone-like vehicle that operate just below the surface of the water. They're mainly used for reconnaissance. So because this area is home to a lot of sensitive installations, there's some speculation that USOs are actually foreign technology.
In March 2024, retired Navy Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet published a 29-page report warning of the underwater anomalies that jeopardize U.S. maritime security. Could Jeremy have encountered an otherworldly underwater threat? Our experts take a deep dive into whether these theories hold water. First, we consider the popular theory that Jeremy's unidentified submerged object was just a bioluminescent creature.
There's actually a bioluminescing phytoplankton known as Noctiluca scintillans. It is a tiny organism that is able to generate its own light. But what we see here is something that's very large and it looks to be solid. And so for that reason, I would say it's less likely that this is some kind of phytoplankton.
So could the light be from a spy submarine?
You see the light move around a lot. And you also see, this kind of a spot of light over here now. It's kind of weird. Oh, the spot moved over here. Seems like what we're actually seeing here is something in the water that's being illuminated by a spotlight.
But what would that something be? The most definitive confirmation comes 15 seconds into Jeremy's video.
Once I was able to kind of isolate some of the background noise, I could hear a bystander mentioned a boat. You start to realize, oh wait, this could be a boat. Is this a capsized boat?
I think what we're looking at is the hull of an upturned boat. The hull is the underneath of the boat. What we see here is kind of the back of the boat, which is more squared off, and then the prow of the boat here, which is more pointed.
Because cruise ships are required by maritime law to aid distressed vessels, we have no trouble imagining why the ship stopped to take a closer look at this object.
The boat capsizes and a cruise ship comes across it. They think, well, maybe this is a boat that someone needs rescuing. So they shine the spotlight on it and they just see this capsized boat.
Our verdict? This isn't a creature from above or below the waterline. This is just a small capsized boat being illuminated by the cruise ship's searchlight. The Coast Guard ultimately deemed the boat derelict and did not attempt a search and rescue. Of all the miracles reported by Christians around the world, visions of Mary, the mother of Jesus, may be the most common. Still, out of the countless reported sightings over the centuries, the Vatican has deemed only 16 to be valid divine apparitions. Could this be another? December 17th, 1996, Clearwater, Florida. As Christmas approaches, a large and mysterious image appears on the window panes of an office building. Soon, crowds flock to see what some are calling a miracle. It is a rainbow-tinged, stained-glass image resembling iconic depictions of the Virgin Mary. The likeness stands at least 50 feet high and more than 20 feet wide. The event soon becomes known all over the world as Our Lady of Clearwater. Photographer Chris Lauber recalls capturing the phenomenon on camera.
I just stood there and was like, wow, this is amazing. And it wasn't one of these kind of things where, oh, gee, you need to look at it a half hour before sunset and don't blink because it'll be gone. It was so readily apparent. There was a number of people who made a pilgrimage on Christmas Eve, and it made it even that much more spectacular.
This is what you would call a Marian apparition, where some aspect of Mary appears. They say that there were about 500,000 people within months visiting this site. These places are really important and looked at as sites of miracles. Probably the most famous one is the experience from 1531, when a saint in Mexico City opened his cloak and flowers fell out of the cloak, and an image of the Virgin of Guadalupe appeared on the cloak. That cloak still exists, and it sits in a church in Mexico City.
On February 6, 2023, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake brought catastrophic destruction to the Turkish city of Iskenderun. While a cathedral was demolished, a statue of Mary at the site was unharmed. At the time, some deemed that event a miracle. But what about our Mary in Clearwater? Let's go to the experts. Could this be an example of divine intervention?
The 1996 Clearwater case is unique in the sense that the Catholic Church did not investigate this in any way or give it any form of approval. In the history of the Catholic Church, there's only one case that I'm aware of in Austria, where an 18-year-old girl claimed to see a vision of the Virgin Mary appearing on glass.
If this purportedly holy image failed to capture the church's attention, how did it captivate so many believers? One possibility is a psychological trick we talk about regularly on this show, pareidolia.
The brain is an image-generating machine. When you look at clouds, when you look at pictures like this, you think you see something that may or may not be there. This is one interpretation of why people by the thousands will come to see and pay reverence to an image that they see in glass.
But what caused this image to appear on the window?
I think we're seeing a scientifically explainable process here where we have a protective layer on the glass, or maybe we have metal oxides in the glass itself. We might have damage to the protective layers from heat and moisture that also warps the glass underneath. This creates an effect that's similar sometimes to the rainbow patterns you see on an oil slick on top of water, for example. And then good old pareidolia, that could all together conspire to create an image that's interpreted by the human mind.
Our verdict, we agree with Shadagas that this was caused by corrosion of the glass coating on the office building's windows. But this image has never reappeared in a similar fashion, which for some might leave the window open for a divine explanation. All around the world, iconic ancient ruins stand as hallmarks of human achievement. The Great Pyramids in Egypt, Stonehenge in England. But in our next story, we visit an ancient site so impressive, some say it couldn't have been built by human hands. On a desert plateau in the Andes Mountains of western Bolivia lies a place known as Pumapunku, which roughly translates to Door of the Puma. At a distance, it looks a little bit like a construction site, but a closer look reveals this. We see dozens of amazing smooth stones and structures featuring clean right angles, along with expertly fitted and spaced joints and drill holes. Perfectly cut H patterns and designs are seen carved into the stones, some with small doorways. These megaliths are among the biggest on Earth, with the largest weighing about 131 tons. Estimates on Pumapunku's age vary, but many say it's more than 1,500 years old. But author and filmmaker Brian Forster has studied the site for decades, and he isn't so sure.
Standard story is that it was constructed by a culture called the Tiwanaku people, who were barely Bronze Age. But in my first visit to Pumapunku, convinced me that it had to have been done with very advanced technology. The surfaces are so flat that I had brought at different times a 3-foot level and put it up against the stones, and they're perfectly straight. There's no wobble of the level at all.
And this isn't the only mystery at this ancient site.
There are very strange magnetic anomalies with the gray andesite stone. It makes compasses literally go crazy, which is hard to explain.
The mysterious nature of this site has even inspired otherworldly theories.
So the first time I went there, I entertained the idea that it could have been done by aliens that left nothing behind except the ruins themselves.
There certainly are some people who believe that these blocks were so meticulously and precisely made that they could only have been made by ancient astronauts. Part of the mystery that exists here is indeed Pumapunku means doorway of the puma. So perhaps these are small doorways to go through and enter a different world entirely?
The first modern power tool was invented in 1895. It was a hand drill with a small electric motor, and it led to today's DIY darlings like this baby. But these inventions didn't exist thousands of years ago. So how did Puma Punku come to be? Let's drill down with our experts. A 2018 geologic study unlocked a secret about these amazing structures.
A geologist determined that perhaps these are, in fact, cement molds, very ancient ones made mostly of andesite dust, and it would explain a lot of these perfect angles. It just seems hard to believe that people 2,000 years ago had the technology to make cement.
Amazing, but not impossible. After all, the ancient Egyptians are said to have invented a mortar-like crude form of concrete and were using it in 3000 BCE before the commonly believed construction of Puma Punku. And even if these were carved from stone blocks, the ancient Tiwanaku had surprisingly effective tools for that.
The tools needed could have been fashioned out of the local stone, especially flint or what we call chert. That is a very hard stone, and if you use it in the hands of a master, it can carve into granite.
What about those who suggest these structures were created by aliens?
There are many fantastic works of man, some much older than Puma Punku. Has anyone ever suggested that the Greek Parthenon was made by aliens? No. Well, to me, it's evidence that humans had the same capacity all over the planet.
Then what explains Brian Forster's claim that the stones wield strange magnetic properties?
There are a few stones that are magnetized, but stones can be naturally magnetized. If a large iron-infiltrated stone gets hit by a bolt of lightning, that is enough to magnetize it.
But these explanations remain speculative, at least in part. Many questions remain about Puma Punku, especially because no sculpting tools have ever been found here.
The lack of tools points in favor of not being able to explain the architecture. The huge size of the blocks as well. How could they move such big things? And frankly, that's still an unanswered part of the mystery.
The evening air over Turkey's Aegean coast carried an unusual tension, a mixture of humidity and expectation that seemed to thrum with an invisible energy. Villagers who had spent their lives along the jagged shoreline spoke in hushed tones about the strange scorch marks that had begun appearing in the fields and sparse woodlands surrounding their homes, burned rings of grass and soil that seemed untouched by conventional fire. They whispered of lights in the sky that moved with impossible precision, dancing and weaving through clouds as if they defied gravity, leaving trails of luminescence that lingered long after the objects had vanished. Dr. Emre Kokuk, a physicist who had spent decades studying atmospheric anomalies, had been called to the area by the Ministry of Science, reluctant at first to accept what the local authorities described as UFO activity, a term that made his colleagues in Ankara smirk with skepticism. Yet as he drove down the winding roads leading to the small village of Gökseren, passing fields where wheat had grown in spirals that no plow could account for, he felt a prickling sensation along his neck and arms, as though the air itself was charged with static electricity. The villagers greeted him with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Some held talismans, charms, or religious icons, murmuring prayers while casting furtive glances at the sky. Others simply shook their heads, insisting that anyone who had witnessed the phenomena would never speak of it openly for fear of ridicule. Emre was led to the site by a man named Halil, a farmer whose hands were calloused from decades of tending olives and figs. Halil's voice trembled slightly as he described the night he first saw the lights. It was no airplane, no helicopter, he insisted. It moved like a fish in the sea, glowing, changing colors, then it hovered and the ground beneath it burned. When Emre followed Halil to the spot, he saw for himself the blackened, oval-shaped scorch marks etched into the soil. The smell of ozone was thick, metallic, and lingering, like the residue left after a lightning strike, yet there had been no storm. Emre knelt, taking samples, measuring the radiation levels with a portable spectrometer. To his astonishment, the readings were unlike anything he had encountered. Not only were isotopes present that hinted at high-energy interactions, but the magnetic field of the area fluctuated wildly, as though reacting to some unseen force. The villagers huddled nearby, exchanging stories of similar occurrences in remote parts of the region, livestock behaving erratically, sudden electronic failures, compasses spinning uncontrollably. One elderly woman claimed to have seen figures, shadowy, tall, not human, at the edge of the woods, vanishing when she tried to approach. Emre's logical mind wrestled with the data. The scorch marks could not be easily explained by natural fire, by meteorites, or by human machinery. Yet he knew that to admit this publicly, to claim these were extraterrestrial phenomena, would invite ridicule, possibly even jeopardize his career. Nevertheless, the evidence demanded investigation. That night, he set up an array of cameras and sensors around the largest scorch mark, hoping to capture any recurring activity. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of sage and damp earth. Then, around midnight, the first signal came, a soft, pulsing glow on the horizon, moving against the current of the wind. Emre froze. The object did not descend as a helicopter would, nor did it emit the sound of engines. Instead, it hovered with a gentle sway, a perfect oval of iridescent light, pulsating in shades of blue and green. As he adjusted his equipment, another glow appeared, further away, following an impossible trajectory, darting behind the hills and re-emerging seconds later without a hint of acceleration. His cameras recorded the phenomenon, infrared and high definition, but more curious than the visuals was the field effect around the objects. Compasses swung violently, small metallic. Instruments emitted sparks, and the very ground beneath them seemed to shimmer with residual heat. By dawn, Emre had gathered terabytes of data, but what concerned him most were the footprints, perfectly preserved, semicircular impressions in the scorched soil, as though whatever had descended had a weight but no conventional form. Analysis of the samples in his makeshift field lab revealed traces of unknown compounds, crystalline formations that suggested extreme heat and pressure, yet were not consistent with any chemical reactions known on Earth. Emre pondered the implications. These were not mere atmospheric phenomena, nor could they be dismissed as human hoaxes. Something truly anomalous had visited this place. Over the next several nights, the pattern repeated. Objects appeared, leaving scorch marks and residual energy fields, always retreating before sunrise. Villagers, initially terrified, began to see the events as part of their lives, integrating the stories into local legend, giving names to the lights, speaking of the dancers in the sky with reverence and fear. Emre's reports, meanwhile, were growing increasingly technical, dense with measurements and observations, yet the ministry insisted he remain cautious to avoid public panic. Still, word of the activities spread internationally. UFO enthusiasts, journalists, and amateur astronomers arrived, eager to witness the Turkey Scorch phenomenon for themselves. Some claimed to have seen humanoid silhouettes near the scorched areas. Others insisted the objects emitted sounds akin to low-frequency humming, vibrating through the soil and into the bones. One night, a team of independent investigators brought drones equipped with thermal imaging and ultraviolet sensors. They recorded strange energy pulses, patterns of movement that suggested intelligence, not random motion. But even more intriguing was a discovery near the largest scorch mark, a small lake hidden within a depression in the landscape, whose waters shimmered with an unnatural luminescence. Emre could not explain it. The water contained traces of rare minerals, some reacting to electromagnetic fields in ways that defied conventional physics. Locals whispered that this was Turkey's own version of Loch Ness, that something ancient and unseen lurked beneath the glowing waters, possibly connected to the skyborne visitors. Emre remained skeptical but intrigued. As the nights progressed, he noticed subtle changes in the behavior of wildlife around the area. Birds avoided the scorch sites. Even during the day, small mammals abandoned their burrows, and insects seemed to move in irregular patterns, as if repelled or attracted by invisible forces. It was a symphony of anomalous behavior, a theater of interactions between terrestrial life and some external influence. Then, one particularly quiet night, a team member spotted a craft descending slowly near the lake. It emitted a soft, resonant tone, harmonizing with the subtle vibrations in the water. The object's reflection in the lake created a dazzling, almost hypnotic visual, as if the water itself was participating in the event. Emre watched, heart pounding, as the craft hovered, then moved horizontally at impossible speed, leaving arcs of light etched across the night sky. The team attempted to measure radiation and magnetic fields in real time, but their instruments overloaded, displaying values beyond known scientific limits. Emre, aware that what he was witnessing could redefine human understanding of physics, took detailed notes, knowing that skepticism and scientific rigor were his only shields against accusations of delusion. When the craft finally vanished, it left behind a lingering heat signature in the soil and a residual charge in the air, a tangible reminder that something extraordinary had occurred. By morning, the lake's water had reverted to a more natural state, but the surrounding earth bore new marks, spirals and lines forming patterns that resembled complex glyphs, unintelligible yet precise. The villagers, witnessing this, fell silent, struck by awe and fear. Emre realized that these marks were not random. They were deliberate, intentional evidence of intelligence beyond human comprehension. Over the following days, he expanded his investigations, setting up motion sensors, chemical analyzers, and high-frequency microphones. Yet each new discovery only deepened the mystery. Trace elements that had no terrestrial origin, electromagnetic readings inconsistent with known physics, and subtle biological changes in the soil microbes all suggested an interaction on multiple levels: physical, chemical, and possibly even informational. Emre began to formulate hypotheses, tentatively suggesting that these objects were not merely visitors, but agents capable of altering the environment in controlled ways. He considered the possibility of communication through energy patterns, perhaps even an attempt to study or interact with Earth's biosphere. International experts began to weigh in. Some were quick to dismiss the findings as natural phenomena, rare yet explainable through plasma physics or unusual atmospheric conditions. Others argued that the evidence, particularly the crystalline samples and the organized ground markings, pointed unmistakably to intelligent origin, possibly extraterrestrial. News outlets ran stories, ranging from sensationalist to skeptical, while online communities erupted with debate. UFO hunters speculated endlessly, connecting the Turkey's Scorch marks to other global incidents, suggesting a pattern of visitation spanning continents. Emre, while deeply absorbed in the scientific process, could not ignore a creeping concern. If these events were part of a larger, coordinated pattern, what was the intent of the visitors? Observing their precision and restraint, he concluded that no hostile intent had been demonstrated, yet the implications for human knowledge were staggering. Then, as if responding to the speculation, a new development occurred. During a particularly dark night, multiple crafts appeared simultaneously, forming a geometrically precise formation above the lake. They emitted light in coordinated pulses, synchronized in ways that suggested a language or signaling method. Emre's instruments recorded fluctuations in gravity and electromagnetic fields, producing data that baffled even the most experienced physicists. The villagers, watching from a safe distance, fell to their knees in a mixture of fear, reverence, and astonishment, many believing they were witnessing a sacred visitation. Emre, documenting every detail, understood that this event represented a pivotal moment. The scorched soil, the luminescent lake, the anomalous readings all formed an interconnected tableau, evidence that humanity was no longer alone in its observations of the cosmos. As dawn approached, the crafts disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind only faint scorch marks, disrupted soil patterns, and an indelible sense of mystery. Emre felt both exhilarated and humbled. He knew the work ahead would be monumental, analyzing the samples, interpreting the energy patterns, and publishing findings that would challenge conventional science. Yet he also sensed that the village of Goxarin, with its scorched fields and luminescent lake, had become a nexus of phenomena that transcended local boundaries, a place where human understanding collided with the unknown, and where the line between myth and reality blurred under the night sky filled with dancing lights. That first night marked the beginning of a journey that would take Emre and his team across landscapes, through historical records, and into encounters that challenged every assumption about life, intelligence, and the universe. It was a journey that promised revelations, danger, and wonder, all beginning with the mysterious UFO scorch marks in the heart of Turkey and a lake whose depths held secrets as ancient as the stars themselves. As days bled into nights, Emre Kokuk found himself increasingly ensnared in the enigma of Goxarin. The villagers' fear and fascination had begun to intertwine, creating a delicate social tension. Some refused to approach the lake or the scorched fields, claiming the lights had seen them and that the woods now whispered warnings. Others, emboldened or perhaps numbed by repetition, wandered closer to the glyph-like scorch patterns, tracing their fingers along the cooled ridges of scorched soil, murmuring in awe at the precision and complexity of the designs. Emre, ever the scientist, observed their behavior with a mixture of concern and curiosity, aware that human psychology was being tested alongside the anomalies themselves. It was during one particularly still night, under a sky washed with the faint glow of distant stars, that Emre noticed something peculiar. The scorched rings, previously scattered and seemingly random, were beginning to form a pattern visible only from a vantage point above the lake. Utilizing a drone equipped with a high-resolution camera, he ascended into the night, the drone's propellers cutting silently through the air. As the camera feed displayed on his monitor, Emre felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The scorch marks traced a sequence of symbols, geometric and angular, forming a grid that seemed to extend beyond the physical bounds of the fields. At its center, the largest scorch ring appeared to pulse faintly, as though echoing the rhythm of the lights he had observed weeks earlier. The drone's sensors detected a subtle, low-frequency hum, not audible to the human ear but unmistakable in its presence, resonating through the surrounding soil and water. He recorded everything meticulously, his mind racing to formulate a hypothesis. Could this be a method of communication? A deliberate message encoded in a physical medium, intended for him or anyone observing from the right vantage. The idea seemed absurd, yet the evidence mounted. Emre deployed additional drones the following nights, arranging them to map the full extent of the glyphs in 3 dimensions. Each time, the pattern expanded, as if the phenomenon was aware of his monitoring efforts and adjusted accordingly. The lake, too, reacted. Its waters shimmered with bioluminescent glows, pulses of light that corresponded with the position and timing of the aerial objects. Emre began suspecting a link between the crafts, the scorched symbols, and the lake's unusual luminescence. Intriguingly, water samples analyzed in his field lab revealed microscopic formations that resembled crystalline filaments, their molecular alignment influenced by electromagnetic fields. These filaments appeared to function like optical fibers, transmitting subtle pulses of energy from one location to another. Could the lake itself be part of a communication network, a receptacle for information or energy, carefully engineered by the mysterious visitors? The more Emre observed, the more the possibilities seemed plausible. On one occasion, he noticed that after a particularly bright display of aerial lights, small, perfectly spherical indentations appeared along the banks of the lake. Each indentation contained a residue of material that reflected light in iridescent hues, akin to the glow of the crafts themselves. Chemical analysis revealed compounds unfamiliar to conventional chemistry, a mixture of high-energy metals and crystalline elements that seemed capable of interacting with electromagnetic radiation in unpredictable ways. Emre's team expanded, including specialists in quantum physics, biology, and even semiotics, seeking to understand the potential meanings embedded in the symbols. Linguists attempted to decipher patterns, comparing the sequences to ancient scripts, mathematical constants, and natural fractals, yet no conventional analogy sufficed. The phenomenon resisted comprehension, maintaining a deliberate opacity that both frustrated and fascinated them. Meanwhile, the villagers began reporting a new kind of behavior: dreams. Many described vivid nocturnal visions involving strange beings, flying objects, and landscapes illuminated by impossible colors. Some awoke with intricate drawings on scraps of paper, depicting geometries they had never seen, spirals and grids that mirrored the scorch marks. Emery considered whether this could be a form of subliminal communication, the craft's influencing consciousness as well as physical matter. It was during a particularly cold night that Emery himself experienced an anomaly he could not ignore. While monitoring the lake from a small observation tower, he felt a sensation of weightlessness, a fleeting detachment from his body, accompanied by a soft humming that seemed to resonate internally rather than externally. The lights above moved in perfect synchronization, forming arcs and intersecting patterns that suggested intentional choreography. Emery realized with a mixture of awe and fear that the phenomenon might be interactive, responding not only to observation, but perhaps to thought, presence, or consciousness itself. As reports of similar phenomena emerged across Turkey, the Ministry of Science authorized a formal expedition, bringing in additional instruments capable of detecting higher dimensional energy fluctuations and particle anomalies. The team included experts from abroad, each equipped with specialized devices, cameras, and sensors. Initial tests revealed subtle but significant perturbations in space-time near the scorch marks and lake. Clocks registered minuscule discrepancies, laser interferometers detected variations in the expected light paths, and gravimetric readings suggested transient distortions of gravitational fields. Emery, while cautiously interpreting the data, recognized that the evidence could indicate phenomena not just extraterrestrial, but potentially interdimensional in nature. Local media coverage escalated, and soon journalists, documentarians, and enthusiasts from all over the globe arrived, transforming the sleepy village into a hub of curiosity and speculation. Drone footage circulated widely on social media, depicting the nocturnal dances of lights, the surreal reflections on the luminescent lake, and the intricate scorch marks in the fields. While skeptics dismissed the findings as hoaxes or optical illusions, the meticulous documentation, combined with scientific analysis, gave the phenomenon a credibility that could not be easily ignored. During one night of intense observation, a breakthrough occurred. Emery and his team witnessed a craft descend directly above the largest scorch mark, hovering only meters from the lake surface. The object emitted a beam of concentrated light that interacted with the crystalline filaments in the water, producing a visual symphony of refracted beams that traced the shape of the previously observed glyphs in 3 dimensions. The team realized that this was more than simple observation. It was a dynamic projection, a holographic representation encoded in the interaction between light, water, and high-energy crystalline structures. For hours, they watched as the pattern shifted, evolved, and reconfigured, seemingly in response to the team's presence and instruments. It was as though the phenomenon was conscious, observing them even as they observed it. Biological effects also became more pronounced. Small mammals and birds displayed coordinated avoidance behavior, while insects exhibited unusual swarm patterns. Emery hypothesized that the crafts emitted an energy field capable of influencing neurological or sensory processes, possibly as a means of controlling interaction with the environment or as a method of communication. Attempts to measure the field produced inconsistent readings, further suggesting an intelligent, adaptive mechanism beyond conventional physics. In one particularly chilling incident, a team member briefly entered the glow of the descending craft and reported a sensation of temporal distortion, a subjective elongation of perception as if seconds stretched into minutes. When he exited the field, time appeared normal again, and instruments corroborated that no conventional clock anomaly had occurred. Emery meticulously recorded the testimony, understanding that human perception itself was being affected, an additional layer of the mystery. The cultural impact on the village also grew. Rituals and folklore began to emerge spontaneously. Villagers offered symbolic gestures toward the lake, leaving small tokens and arranging stones in patterns resembling the glyphs. Local storytellers recounted tales of ancient visitors from the sky, suggesting that the phenomenon was not new but part of a cyclical visitation spanning centuries, woven into the myths and legends of the region. As Emre dug into historical records, he found accounts of luminescent sightings and scorched ground in Ottoman archives, often dismissed by historians as superstition. Yet the descriptions bore uncanny similarity to the modern events, suggesting a continuity that challenged assumptions about the recentness of the phenomenon. By the third week of observation, the phenomenon intensified. Multiple crafts appeared simultaneously, forming complex geometric formations that seemed to hover above the village, lake, and surrounding fields. The interaction with the crystalline water structures became more elaborate, producing a pulsating light show of almost incomprehensible complexity. Instruments recorded magnetic flux variations, high-energy radiation spikes, and transient distortions in local gravitational fields. Emre theorized that these events represented a deliberate attempt to encode information or establish a communicative interface with humans, employing a combination of visual, electromagnetic, and potentially neurological channels. The team experimented with controlled interaction, signaling with lights, producing low-frequency sound pulses, and even manipulating small electromagnetic devices. Remarkably, the crafts responded, altering their patterns and sequences in apparent acknowledgement. The evidence pointed to an intelligent, adaptive system, a phenomenon that bridged the gap between physical, cognitive, and symbolic domains. Tensions arose among the villagers as well. While many embraced the mysterious visitors, others feared divine retribution or sought to exploit the events for personal gain. Emre acted as intermediary, navigating the delicate social dynamics while remaining focused on scientific documentation. The international press increasingly reported on Gökçeren, often sensationalizing the events, yet the depth of evidence, recorded patterns, chemical analyses, and high-resolution footage lent credibility that could not be dismissed outright. Emre's own understanding evolved. He no longer viewed the phenomena as merely extraterrestrial, but as a multidimensional interaction, a form of intelligence capable of influencing matter, perception, and culture simultaneously. The implications were staggering. A potential paradigm shift in physics, biology, and anthropology, initiated not by human discovery, but by an external intelligence engaging subtly yet deliberately with our world. One night, as the team settled in for long hours of monitoring, Emre noticed a new feature: small luminous entities rising from the lake's surface, ascending in synchrony with the descending crafts. They moved with fluid precision, forming chains and arcs, and appeared semi-transparent yet radiant, leaving trails of energy that lingered briefly in the air. Initial analysis suggested these were not bioluminescent organisms, nor simple light reflections. They were energetic manifestations, possibly of the same technology or consciousness responsible for the crafts. The team speculated that these entities might serve as probes or intermediaries, translating or facilitating communication between the phenomenon and the observers. Emre documented every aspect: speed, trajectory, interaction with instruments, and responses to human presence. Each observation reinforced the growing understanding that Gökçeren was a locus of an extraordinary event, a confluence of cosmic intelligence, terrestrial matter, and human consciousness, operating at levels that defied conventional comprehension. As the night stretched on, Emre felt the weight of history and responsibility pressing upon him. The lake, the scorched fields, the glyphs, and the aerial lights formed a multidimensional puzzle. To interpret them would require not only scientific acumen but imagination, intuition, and perhaps a willingness to embrace the incomprehensible. Each new observation added layers of complexity, revealing an intelligence whose methods, intentions, and scope were as profound as they were enigmatic. And yet, amid the uncertainty, one certainty emerged: the visitors had chosen this place deliberately, embedding messages, patterns, and interactions in ways that challenged human assumptions, inviting observation, participation, and contemplation. By the time Emre had reached the third week of continuous observation, the phenomenon around Goxaran had become a labyrinth of sensory, spatial, and temporal anomalies, each layer more intricate than the last. The scorched fields now bore labyrinthine patterns that seemed to grow organically, expanding overnight with a precision that defied any known mechanical process. Emre theorized that the patterns were adaptive, responding to environmental factors and possibly to the presence of observers. Each morning, the village awoke to new formations, often extending beyond previously mapped zones, suggesting a process that was both creative and intentional. The lake, central to the phenomenon, had undergone further transformation. The crystalline filaments had multiplied, forming a delicate lattice beneath the surface, a network that reacted dynamically to electromagnetic variations and emitted pulses of light that corresponded with the aerial craft's movements. Emre recorded these interactions meticulously, attempting to discern whether the lake acted as a receptor, amplifier, or perhaps a communicative medium. The luminescence was no longer uniform. It carried subtle modulations, almost like a coded language. Attempts to decode the signals using conventional cryptographic analysis failed, reinforcing the notion that the communication, if such it was, transcended human understanding of symbols, requiring perhaps an integrated sensory perception encompassing sight, sound, and electromagnetic resonance. Villagers' accounts became increasingly vivid and detailed. Several reported waking in a trance-like state, guided toward the scorched patterns, their movements mirroring geometric designs as if following invisible pathways. These trance experiences, once isolated, began to cluster temporally around the appearance of the crafts. Some described interactions with humanoid figures, entities of light that emitted no sound yet conveyed presence and awareness. The phenomenon's influence on biological systems was equally remarkable. Birds exhibited flight patterns that mirrored aerial light formations, insects arranged themselves along the glyphic lines, and even small mammals altered their nocturnal behavior. Emre posited that the phenomenon had the capability to influence behavior across species, suggesting a mechanism of environmental control or adaptive signaling. One evening, while conducting a thermal sweep of the largest scorch pattern, Emre observed a new type of anomaly, minute, self-luminous motes rising from the soil, drifting toward the lake before dispersing into the night sky. Analysis revealed that they carried trace compounds identical to those found in the crystalline filaments, indicating a possible transport or interaction mechanism between the scorched terrain and the lake's lattice. The implications were staggering. Matter was not simply being affected by the phenomenon, it was being reorganized, possibly to serve a communicative or functional purpose. Researchers from abroad began arriving in rotation, each bringing specialized equipment. Quantum physicists examined particle behavior near the lake and scorch marks, noting fluctuations in subatomic interactions that suggested an external field of influence. Biologists documented unusual behavioral adaptations in local fauna, while psychologists monitored the villagers for cognitive or perceptual shifts. The combined data painted a portrait of a multifaceted phenomenon capable of influencing physical, biological, and cognitive systems simultaneously. One particularly striking observation occurred during a night of near-total darkness. The aerial crafts descended in a triangular formation above the lake, emitting synchronized pulses of light and energy. As the beams intersected with the crystalline lattice beneath the water, a three-dimensional projection appeared, hovering above the surface like a holographic map. The projection depicted a landscape unfamiliar yet eerily detailed, topographies resembling mountains, rivers, and valleys, punctuated by luminous nodes that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the crafts above. Emre and his team realized they were witnessing a form of external cartography, a visual representation of spatial data encoded through energy interactions. Subsequent analysis revealed that the pulsing nodes corresponded to the scorched glyphs in the surrounding fields, forming a direct correlation between terrestrial patterns and the holographic projection. It was as though the phenomenon had created a spatial network linking ground, water, and aerial display into a coherent system. Attempts to interpret the node's significance through conventional mathematics and symbolism yielded little. Patterns resembled fractals and non-Euclidean geometries, suggesting communication or function beyond human comprehension. Night after night, the crafts exhibited deliberate interaction. When the team deployed experimental light signals, electromagnetic pulses, or sound modulations, the aerial formations responded in kind, altering sequences, intensity, and timing. Emery concluded that the phenomenon possessed an adaptive intelligence, capable of perceiving, interpreting, and responding to stimuli in a manner consistent with conscious decision-making. The villagers' experiences continued to evolve. Several reported direct encounters with semi-luminous entities emerging from the lake, described as humanoid but composed of radiant, shifting energy. These entities did not speak, yet their presence was profoundly affecting. Individuals felt a deep sense of understanding, an intuitive awareness that defied verbal articulation. Some described visions of vast cosmic structures, interstellar landscapes, and geometries of impossible scale, as though the phenomenon was providing glimpses into a reality beyond the earthly plane. Emery was cautious in recording these accounts, aware of the subjective nature of human perception, yet the consistency and reproducibility of the experiences suggested genuine interaction rather than imagination. One night, a significant anomaly occurred. A craft descended slowly, hovering mere meters above the lake's surface. Its light beam penetrated the crystalline lattice, and the holographic projection intensified, revealing a three-dimensional structure resembling an immense spiral, its curvature and scale defying conventional geometry. Emery noted an unprecedented surge in electromagnetic activity. Compasses spun wildly, instruments glitched, and even the team's watches displayed temporary desynchronization. The villagers observed in reverent silence, some instinctively kneeling as if responding to an unspoken directive. At this moment, the lake itself pulsed, waves of luminescence traveling across the water's surface in coordination with the aerial display. Emery theorized that the phenomenon had achieved a full integration of environmental, cognitive, and energetic interaction, creating a composite system that engaged simultaneously with matter, life, and perception. The following days were dedicated to systematic study. Researchers collected soil, water, and air samples, documenting changes in isotopic composition, chemical structure, and crystalline alignment. Analysis revealed the presence of previously unidentified elements, isotopes with unusually high stability and energy potential. The crystalline filaments beneath the lake were found to amplify and channel electromagnetic energy, creating resonant fields that influence both organic and inorganic matter within a defined radius. Attempts to model the system using conventional physics were inadequate. New theoretical frameworks incorporating multidimensional fields, energy-matter interaction, and information transmission were proposed. Emery's team faced both scientific exhilaration and ethical dilemmas. The phenomenon's intelligence seemed to observe and adapt, raising questions about the boundaries of human interference. Any attempt to manipulate or provoke the system risked unpredictable consequences, yet observation alone was insufficient to decode the underlying purpose. One afternoon, an unusual event occurred. A sudden storm gathered over the lake, but unlike ordinary weather, the winds carried no rain, and lightning arcs followed precise trajectories, forming temporary glyphic patterns in the clouds. The aerial crafts responded, synchronizing with the atmospheric display to produce a coordinated light and energy performance. The team documented the event with drones, high-speed cameras, and spectrometers, capturing data that confirmed extreme energy interactions, yet revealed no evidence of conventional atmospheric phenomena. Emery began to understand that the phenomenon's influence extended beyond localized geography. It could manipulate energy, matter, and perception over a wider field, effectively creating a controlled environment for interaction. The villagers' response to these displays evolved further. Some embraced ritualistic practices, leaving symbolic offerings at the lake, arranging stones in precise patterns, or conducting silent vigils. Others retreated into fear, avoiding the fields and woods entirely. Emre observed that the social dynamics themselves were being influenced, a subtle psychological effect akin to environmental conditioning, reinforcing the notion that the phenomenon's intelligence was multidimensional, encompassing biological, cognitive, and cultural elements. By the end of the third week, Emre's team had assembled a comprehensive dataset: high-resolution imagery, spectral analysis, isotopic measurements, magnetic and gravitational readings, biological observations, and psychological reports. The collective evidence pointed to a phenomenon that defied singular categorization, simultaneously physical, informational, cognitive, and possibly interdimensional. Emre realized that traditional scientific paradigms were insufficient to fully interpret what they were witnessing. New conceptual models were needed, incorporating aspects of consciousness, energy manipulation, and adaptive intelligence. It was during a final night of observation in this period that a climactic event occurred. The crafts formed an unprecedented geometric formation above the lake, descending and rotating in perfect synchrony. The crystalline lattice responded with intense pulses of light, projecting a multidimensional holographic structure that enveloped the observation team. Emre felt a profound alteration of perception. Time seemed fluid, space expanded and contracted, and the boundary between self and environment blurred. Villagers experienced similar effects, often describing a sense of unity with the phenomenon, as though they were being temporarily integrated into the system's awareness. When the crafts finally departed, leaving only faint residual energy in the scorched fields and a subtle shimmer across the lake, Emre realized that the phenomenon had revealed an entirely new mode of interaction, one that transcended conventional observation and demanded active perceptual engagement. This event would serve as the foundation for subsequent investigations, offering a glimpse into the potential of a conscious, adaptive intelligence operating across multiple dimensions of reality. For Emre, Gökçeren had transformed from a site of curiosity to a nexus of unprecedented scientific and philosophical inquiry, challenging the boundaries of knowledge, perception, and the human capacity to understand the universe. The following days after the climactic event were a period of intense analysis and reflection. Emre Kokuk and his team immersed themselves in the mountains of data collected during the previous weeks, attempting to discern patterns and underlying principles in the scorched fields, the crystalline lake, and the aerial phenomena. Each piece of evidence seemed to intertwine, forming a multidimensional puzzle that challenged their understanding of physics, biology, and cognition simultaneously. The scorched glyphs, when mapped over successive nights, revealed an almost fractal-like growth pattern, expanding in ways that suggested not only deliberate design, but an adaptive response to environmental stimuli. Emre theorized that the phenomena were not static but dynamic, capable of learning or evolving in response to observation. He compared the sequences to neural networks, considering the possibility that the crafts and environmental changes were components of a system designed to encode information and interaction across multiple layers of reality. Villagers continued to report extraordinary experiences. Some described dreams in which they traversed landscapes illuminated by floating lights, interacting with entities of radiant energy. Others spoke of sudden flashes of insight, mathematical, musical, or linguistic, seemingly delivered from an external source. Emre meticulously documented each account, aware that while anecdotal, the consistency across individuals suggested that the phenomenon exerted influence beyond mere visual or auditory perception, perhaps interfacing directly with cognition. One night, while conducting a spectral sweep of the lake, a new anomaly manifested. Small vortices of light emerged from the water's surface, ascending in perfect spirals and interacting with the crafts above. The vortices emitted low-frequency vibrations, perceptible only as subtle changes in body pressure and internal resonance. Instruments recorded harmonics that defied classical acoustics, suggesting that the energy emitted was not sound in the traditional sense, but a complex wave capable of influencing matter and perception. The team theorized that these vortices functioned as an intermediary or translator between the craft's energy systems and the terrestrial environment. Observing the interaction between the vortices, the crystalline lattice, and the scorched glyphs, Emre concluded that the system's architecture was both spatially and functionally integrated, a network operating across multiple planes of existence. The villagers, increasingly habituated to the nocturnal events, began developing a language of gestures and symbols to communicate with the phenomenon. Small offerings were left along the glyphic paths, stones arranged in spirals, water poured into specific depressions, and objects of symbolic significance placed at the lake's edge. Remarkably, the crafts responded with adjustments in light patterns and flight sequences, suggesting an awareness of human intentionality and symbolic communication. Emre documented these interactions with multiple cameras, spectrometers, and electromagnetic sensors, confirming that the phenomenon exhibited adaptive behavior at levels beyond simple environmental response. Meanwhile, chemical and isotopic analysis of soil and water samples revealed unprecedented anomalies. Crystalline structures previously observed were now extending vertically from the lakebed, forming lattice-like columns that interacted with energy fields emitted by the crafts. Isotopes of elements not typically stable at terrestrial conditions persisted, suggesting manipulation or reinforcement by energetic processes. Emre began theorizing that the phenomenon was capable of localized alteration of physical laws or constraints, creating zones in which conventional chemistry and physics operated differently. This hypothesis, radical though it was, offered a framework to explain previously inexplicable occurrences, including persistent luminescence, behavioral adaptations in wildlife, and perceptual effects. Reported by humans. International teams of scientists arrived, each bringing specialized equipment designed to measure electromagnetic, gravitational, and temporal anomalies. Quantum physicists reported fluctuations in subatomic particle behavior within and around the glyphic patterns, while biologists observed adaptive changes in microbial colonies in the scorched soil and lake water. Psychologists documented increased synesthesia-like experiences among villagers, including the perception of sound as light and vice versa, suggesting a direct modulation of neural processes by the phenomenon. One night, as Emre monitored the lake from an elevated observation platform, the crafts descended in a coordinated formation, creating a three-dimensional lattice of light above the water. The lattice's nodes pulsed in synchronization with previously recorded glyph sequences, producing a visual and energetic symphony that seemed to encode information across multiple sensory channels. Emre attempted to interact using controlled light pulses and electromagnetic signals, and to his astonishment, the crafts responded with changes in pattern, intensity, and trajectory. The interaction suggested a feedback loop in which the phenomenon not only observed human action but adjusted its own output in response. In the midst of these observations, a breakthrough occurred. While analyzing the spectral composition of light reflected from the crystalline lattice, Emre identified specific waveforms that repeated at intervals consistent with prime numerical sequences. This discovery suggested a deliberate encoding of mathematical patterns, possibly serving as a foundation for communication or data transmission. The realization was profound. The phenomenon appeared capable of not only affecting physical reality and perception, but also of employing abstract mathematical concepts, an unmistakable sign of intelligence. Villagers' narratives provided further insight. Several described being guided toward particular glyphs in moments of trance, where they observed new formations emerging in real time. These guided interactions often resulted in complex patterns, previously unrecorded, forming sequences that mirrored holographic projections above the lake. The interplay between observer, glyph, and craft hinted at a system of participatory engagement, in which consciousness and environmental manipulation were intertwined. Emre's team expanded their monitoring efforts, deploying drones capable of real-time spatial scanning, spectral analysis, and thermal imaging. These drones captured detailed data on the craft's flight paths, revealing a remarkable precision and synchronization, even when multiple objects operated simultaneously. Their trajectories followed nonlinear, non-Euclidean curves, often intersecting in ways that produced transient zones of intensified electromagnetic activity. The researchers hypothesized that these zones could serve as nodes of energy transfer or communication, further reinforcing the notion of a highly sophisticated, integrated system. One evening, a team member reported witnessing a humanoid figure composed entirely of radiant energy emerging from the lake. The entity moved with fluid precision, interacting with the crafts and the glyphic patterns. Instruments detected fluctuations in electromagnetic fields and energy densities corresponding to the entity's movements, suggesting a tangible interaction between the manifestation and the surrounding environment. Emre theorized that the entity could be a projection or intermediary of the phenomenon, facilitating communication and environmental modulation. As weeks progressed, the villagers' experiences grew more intense and complex. Some reported visions of distant celestial landscapes, others experienced what they described as temporal dilation, perceiving hours as minutes and vice versa. These experiences were reproducible to an extent, correlating with the presence of crafts and specific glyphic formations, suggesting a deliberate, perhaps pedagogical component to the phenomenon's interaction with human consciousness. Emre and his team meticulously logged each account, seeking patterns and correlations with physical measurements. The synthesis of data revealed an astonishing integration of multiple domains: spatial, energetic, biological, cognitive, and symbolic. The phenomenon was not merely a collection of objects or occurrences, it was an active, intelligent system capable of complex, adaptive interaction across multiple layers of reality. On a particularly significant night, the crafts descended in a formation that created a dynamic, three-dimensional matrix of light and energy above the lake. The crystalline lattice responded with intensified pulses, projecting an intricate holographic structure that enveloped the observation team. The structure displayed patterns resembling fractals and geometric sequences, which shifted and evolved in response to the researchers' movements and gestures. Emre realized they were witnessing an interactive display, a form of communication or demonstration of intelligence operating on a scale that defied conventional comprehension. As the display concluded, residual energy remained in the scorched fields, the lake, and even the surrounding atmosphere. Instruments recorded prolonged electromagnetic fluctuations, minor distortions in gravitational readings, and subtle variations in local timekeeping devices. The cumulative effect of these events indicated a phenomenon capable of exerting measurable influence over fundamental physical processes, extending beyond localized effects to encompass broader environmental modulation. Emre reflected on the implications. Humanity was encountering an intelligence that operated across multiple dimensions of perception and reality, integrating matter, energy, and consciousness in a cohesive system. The ethical and philosophical consequences were profound. Observation alone could alter outcomes. Interaction required careful deliberation. The villagers' role as participants rather than passive witnesses underscored the phenomenon's interactive nature. Over subsequent nights, the pattern of engagement continued, with the crafts, crystalline lattice, glyphs, and environmental conditions forming an interconnected system. Each observation reinforced the growing understanding that the phenomenon was not merely a local anomaly, but a deliberate, intelligent, and adaptive entity engaging with humans, the environment, and possibly the broader biosphere. The challenge facing Emre and his team was immense: to decode, document, and understand a system that defied conventional scientific paradigms, one that operated simultaneously on physical, cognitive, and symbolic levels. The complexity and scope of the event suggested that any comprehensive understanding would require unprecedented integration of disciplines, bridging physics, biology, cognitive science, mathematics, and philosophy. Yet, for all its mystery, one certainty emerged: Goksurin had become a nexus, a confluence of intelligence, energy, and consciousness, offering humanity a glimpse of phenomena that transcended traditional understanding. Emre felt the weight of responsibility keenly, aware that their observations could redefine humanity's conception of intelligence, reality, and its place in the cosmos. Each night, as the crafts ascended, descended, and interacted with the glyphs and the lake, he documented meticulously, knowing that the synthesis of this data might one day form the foundation for a revolutionary understanding of the universe. The scorched fields, crystalline lake, luminous entities, and adaptive aerial crafts were no longer separate anomalies. They were components of a singular, intelligent system, one that challenged assumptions, demanded engagement, and hinted at possibilities beyond human comprehension. Emre's role had shifted from observer to participant, immersed in a multidimensional dialogue with forces that were at once physical, cognitive, and symbolic. The nights at Goxaran, illuminated by pulsating lights and interwoven glyphic patterns, had become a stage for encounters that transcended ordinary experience. The phenomenon's intelligence was deliberate, adaptive, and profound, a presence that defied classification yet revealed itself in patterns, interactions, and shared experience. As he stood by the luminescent lake, observing the latest aerial display, Emre understood that humanity's engagement with the unknown had entered a new phase. The scorched fields, the crystalline lattice, and the holographic projections above the lake were not mere curiosities. They were invitations, a call to expand perception, to integrate observation with participation, and to explore the boundaries of knowledge in a universe where intelligence and consciousness operated in ways that were simultaneously alien and compelling. As the fifth week of observation unfolded, Emre Kokuk's perspective of Goxaran shifted from scientific curiosity to profound existential contemplation. The continuous manifestations, the aerial crafts, the crystalline lake, the expanding scorch glyphs no longer felt like isolated anomalies. Instead, they coalesced into a cohesive system, one that operated on multiple levels of reality and challenged the very boundaries of human perception. The villagers, now deeply acclimated to the nocturnal phenomenon, had begun to integrate its presence into daily life. Some rose before dawn, hoping to witness residual luminescent activity across the scorched fields. Others conducted silent, meditative practices at the lake, attempting to intuitively synchronize with the pulses and holographic projections that Emre's team had documented. A few claimed that by observing the glyphs at specific angles or performing particular sequences of gestures, they could subtly influence the lights in the sky, causing minor shifts in color, speed, or trajectory. While anecdotal, these reports were consistent and correlated with recorded responses from the crafts, suggesting that the phenomenon could perceive and interact with human intentionality on a nuanced level. Emre's team expanded their instrumentation to account for these interactions, deploying multispectral cameras, gravimetric sensors, and real-time neurofeedback devices. Volunteers among the villagers wore EEG monitors to record brain activity, and preliminary analysis revealed consistent patterns of neural synchronization when individuals reported perceptual influence over the phenomenon. These observations indicated a bidirectional feedback loop. Human consciousness was affecting the phenomenon, while the phenomenon simultaneously influenced perception, cognition, and environmental conditions. On the seventh night of the fifth week, a particularly unprecedented event occurred. Multiple crafts descended in a coordinated V-shaped formation, hovering at varying altitudes above the lake. Each emitted pulsating beams that interacted with the crystalline lattice below, producing an elaborate three-dimensional projection resembling a luminous spiral staircase extending into the night sky. The spiral emitted harmonic vibrations detectable in both air pressure and low-frequency electromagnetic fields, creating a palpable resonance that the human body could perceive as a subtle tingling or sense of weightlessness. Observing this, Emre realized that the phenomenon had begun to encode information in multidimensional formats, utilizing simultaneous visual, auditory, and electromagnetic channels. The projection shifted dynamically, responding to the presence and movement of observers, suggesting a sophisticated adaptive intelligence capable of perceiving both physical and cognitive input. Villagers described entering altered states of consciousness during these displays, some experiencing profound insights or visions of distant landscapes, celestial geometries, or even hypothetical advanced civilizations. Emre meticulously recorded these accounts alongside instrument data, noting strong correlations between neural activity, environmental modulation, and the holographic projections. The combination suggested a highly integrated system, one capable of engaging observers at cognitive, sensory, and emotional levels simultaneously. The next night, Emre deployed a new type of drone equipped with multi-sensor feedback loops and quantum-level detection arrays. As the crafts hovered, emitting synchronized pulses, the drone's instruments captured energy fluctuations that exceeded known terrestrial thresholds. High-energy particle readings, anomalous magnetic resonance, and localized temporal distortions indicated a phenomenon operating beyond conventional physical laws. Intriguingly, these fluctuations appeared modulated in precise intervals, hinting at deliberate encoding rather than random energetic discharge. Further analysis suggested that the crafts were capable of manipulating local space-time, creating conditions that temporarily altered perception and measurement. One of the most startling observations involved a humanoid form emerging from the lake, composed entirely of luminous energy. The entity's movements were fluid, seemingly independent of conventional biomechanics, yet each action corresponded to measurable environmental changes, ripples in the water, variations in electromagnetic fields, and subtle perturbations in gravimetric readings. Team members reported an intense, almost tangible sense of presence, accompanied by fleeting perceptions of expanded spatial awareness and temporal dilation. Instruments corroborated minor but consistent anomalies in localized space-time metrics during the entity's presence. In parallel, chemical analysis of water and soil samples revealed ongoing changes. New crystalline formations had appeared, extending upward from the lakebed, forming lattices that interacted dynamically with the aerial crafts. Isotopic analysis continued to reveal compounds not typically stable under terrestrial conditions, suggesting either advanced technological manipulation or processes beyond current human understanding. The phenomenon's adaptive complexity became increasingly evident. Glyph sequences on the scorched fields evolved in coordination with aerial movements and lake activity, forming nested, fractal-like structures. When humans intervened, whether intentionally or inadvertently, the glyphs altered their configuration, producing a responsive environmental system capable of integrating biological, cognitive, and physical stimuli into coherent sequences. This raised profound questions about agency and interaction. Were humans participants in a deliberate communication protocol, or were they being observed as part of a larger, ongoing experiment? Emre recognized that deciphering the underlying principles would require unprecedented interdisciplinary collaboration, combining physics, cognitive science, information theory, and semiotics. On one night, a sequence of events illuminated the phenomenon's potential communicative sophistication. The crafts arranged themselves in a tetrahedral formation, projecting holographic symbols above the lake. At the same time, the crystalline lattice pulsed in precise intervals, producing a resonance detectable by the human nervous system. Observers described involuntary alignment with the projections, as though their bodily movements were subtly guided to mirror the holographic geometry. These coordinated actions produced a multi-layered feedback loop. The observers influenced the projection, which altered environmental resonance, which in turn modulated human perception. Emre documented this with high-resolution sensors and neurofeedback equipment, confirming the integration of cognitive, physical, and symbolic interactions. The villagers continued to adapt their behaviors in response. Rituals, initially intuitive, became increasingly complex and coordinated, forming sequences that mirrored glyphic patterns, holographic projections, and aerial movements. Some individuals developed the ability to anticipate shifts in the phenomenon, suggesting heightened sensitivity to environmental and cognitive cues. Emre hypothesized that these adaptations represented a form of emergent cognition, wherein human perception and the phenomenon co-evolved through continuous interaction. As the phenomenon intensified, researchers observed that wildlife behavior exhibited similar adaptive patterns. Birds and insects moved along trajectories aligned with glyphic structures. Small mammals adjusted foraging and nesting behaviors in response to electromagnetic fluctuations. And aquatic life within the lake responded to variations in crystalline lattice activity. These biological responses suggested that the phenomenon influenced ecological as well as cognitive systems, integrating multiple layers of life into a coherent, interactive network. A particularly revealing incident occurred during an unprecedented display of coordinated activity. Crafts descended simultaneously, forming a spiral lattice above the lake while projecting multidimensional holographic sequences. The crystalline lattice emitted pulses of energy that interacted with the lake's water, producing visual interference patterns reminiscent of wave propagation in quantum fields. Observers within close proximity reported simultaneous sensations of spatial expansion, temporal distortion, and altered perceptual awareness. Instruments recorded fluctuations in gravimetric and electromagnetic fields consistent with relativistic effects, further suggesting manipulation of fundamental physical parameters. The level of integration was unprecedented. Matter, energy, and consciousness were interacting in a system that defied conventional modeling. Researchers began to postulate that the phenomenon might represent an intelligence operating simultaneously across multiple dimensions, capable of encoding, transmitting, and receiving information through energy, matter, and consciousness. Preliminary modeling suggested that the glyphic sequences functioned as structural anchors for environmental modulation, while aerial patterns and holographic projections facilitated cognitive engagement and communication. The crystalline lattice appeared to serve as a resonant medium, linking physical and cognitive domains. Emre's team realized that the phenomenon's intelligence was not merely reactive but interactive, capable of anticipating observer behavior and adapting its output accordingly. This represented a level of sophistication far beyond conventional terrestrial or extraterrestrial models. Villagers, fully immersed in the ongoing events, provided invaluable qualitative data. They reported subtle, consistent alterations in perception, cognition, and emotional state during proximity to the lake, glyphs, or aerial crafts. Their experiences suggested that the phenomenon engaged with consciousness directly, producing reproducible effects across multiple individuals. These observations corroborated quantitative measurements, indicating that the system integrated biological, physical, and cognitive components into a unified interactive network. By the end of the 5th week, Emre recognized that Goxaran had become more than a site of observation. It was a living laboratory in which consciousness, matter, and energy were interwoven into a complex, adaptive system. The phenomenon's intelligence, evident in glyphic evolution, aerial precision, environmental modulation, and cognitive interaction, suggested a form of awareness operating at multiple scales and dimensions. Each night, as the crafts ascended, descended, and projected holographic sequences, Emre documented the interplay with unparalleled care, aware that these events could redefine humanity's understanding of intelligence, perception, and the very structure of reality. The scorched fields, crystalline lattice, luminous entities, and adaptive aerial crafts were no longer discrete anomalies. They were components of an integrated, multidimensional system inviting participation, observation, and engagement. Emre's role had evolved from passive observer to active participant in an ongoing dialogue between human cognition and an intelligence that transcended conventional comprehension. Each interaction, each glyph sequence, each pulse of light represented an opportunity to understand not only the mechanics, but the purpose of the phenomenon. Goxaran, with its scorched earth, radiant lake, and sky-born intelligence, had become a threshold, a place where human understanding met the unknown, where observation could alter reality, and where consciousness itself became a medium of interaction with forces both alien and profoundly instructive. The implications were both exhilarating and daunting. Humanity had glimpsed an intelligence operating on a scale beyond comprehension, one that integrated matter, energy, and consciousness in ways that challenged conventional science. The journey had only begun, and the nights at Goxran promised further revelations, each more intricate, adaptive, and profound than the last. As the phenomenon persisted into the 6th week, Emre Kokuk and his team began to notice patterns not only in the physical manifestations, but also in the temporal rhythms of the events. The aerial crafts, which had previously appeared at irregular intervals, now descended with astonishing regularity, their sequences synchronized to subtle oscillations in the lake's crystalline lattice. Each pulse of light, each hum of energy, and each shift in glyph configuration seemed part of a larger temporal framework, a cadence that suggested a sophisticated understanding of both rhythm and resonance. Emre hypothesized that the phenomenon operated according to an internal temporal algorithm capable of integrating external stimuli, human observation, and environmental variables into a coherent temporal structure. The villagers' involvement had also deepened, as their daily routines became interwoven with the phenomenon. Some began to anticipate glyph alterations, moving through the fields to positions that corresponded with emergent scorch patterns, while others practiced silent observation, attempting to intuitively align themselves with aerial formations and holographic projections. Intriguingly, these practices appeared to influence the phenomenon itself. Subtle changes in light intensity, pattern configuration, and pulse frequency were observed in direct correlation with villagers' movements or attentional focus. The implication was profound. Human cognition was no longer a passive observer, but an active participant, influencing a system of intelligence that integrated matter, energy, and consciousness. On one particular night, a new form of anomaly emerged. A large craft descended slowly above the lake, projecting a lattice of light that extended beyond the water's surface into the surrounding air. Within the lattice, smaller nodes pulsed in synchronized intervals, each corresponding to glyphic patterns on the scorched fields below. The holographic projection that accompanied the craft displayed intricate fractal geometries, evolving dynamically in response to the team's movements and gestures. Emre noticed that the projection's complexity increased when observers remained still and attentive, and decreased when they moved chaotically, suggesting an adaptive intelligence capable of perceiving and responding to human focus and intentionality. In parallel, the crystalline lattice within the lake began to exhibit vertical growth, forming pillar-like structures that interacted with the projected holograms. Spectral analysis revealed that these structures functioned as conduits for energy transfer, connecting the aerial craft's emissions to the lake's crystalline network. The interaction produced subtle electromagnetic fields that modulated local wildlife behavior, human perception, and environmental conditions simultaneously. Birds flew along glyph-aligned trajectories, insects followed intricate flight paths corresponding to light projections, and even small mammals exhibited behavioral adjustments consistent with energetic gradients. Emre theorized that the phenomenon's intelligence was multilayered, simultaneously operating in physical, biological, and cognitive dimensions. The villagers' cognitive engagement became increasingly sophisticated. Some reported experiencing a phenomenon they described as resonant empathy, in which their thoughts, emotions, and bodily awareness appeared temporarily synchronized with the pulses of light and energy. EEG monitoring confirmed unusual neural patterns during these experiences. Brainwave frequencies demonstrated coherent oscillation with environmental pulses, suggesting a form of neural entrainment orchestrated by the phenomenon. Emre realized that the system was capable of inducing adaptive cognitive states, facilitating interaction through shared resonance between observer and environment. Another remarkable development occurred when small luminous entities emerged from the lake, moving with fluid precision among the aerial crafts. These entities, described as semi-intelligent, appeared to act as intermediaries, amplifying or modulating the energy interactions between the crafts, the crystalline lattice, and human observers. Instruments detected subtle shifts in local electromagnetic and gravitational fields corresponding to the entity's positions and movements, confirming that their influence was not merely visual, but materially interactive. The phenomenon's complexity and integration challenged every conventional model MRAE had previously considered. It was no longer sufficient to analyze individual components in isolation. Aerial crafts, glyphs, crystalline lattice, or cognitive responses all operated as an integrated network. Each variable influenced the others, producing emergent behaviors that defied linear causality. MRAE and his team began developing new theoretical frameworks incorporating multidimensional feedback loops, consciousness-environment interaction, and adaptive intelligence, attempting to describe a system that was simultaneously physical, cognitive, and symbolic. During one intense observational period, the crafts arranged themselves into a complex tetrahedral formation, projecting a spiraling holographic lattice above the lake. The lattice emitted harmonic vibrations that created perceptual resonance in nearby observers, producing sensations of weightlessness, temporal elongation, and spatial expansion. The holographic nodes corresponded precisely with glyph sequences on the scorched fields, forming a cohesive, multidimensional communication network. Attempts to interact with the lattice using controlled light pulses, sound frequencies, and electromagnetic modulation produced responsive alterations in pattern, intensity, and timing, confirming that the phenomenon actively monitored and adapted to human actions. Villagers' participation provided critical insights. Several individuals developed the ability to anticipate glyph transformations or subtle shifts in aerial patterns, suggesting heightened perceptual sensitivity. Others described intuitive understanding of the holographic projections, performing gestures or aligning their positions in ways that elicited measurable responses from the phenomenon. MRAE recognized that the system facilitated a bidirectional flow of information. Human cognition influenced the phenomenon, and the phenomenon influenced perception, behavior, and environmental conditions. The biological impact was equally profound. Observations revealed coordinated behavior in local wildlife, including synchronized flight paths of birds and insects along glyphic lines, behavioral adaptation in small mammals, and response of aquatic organisms to pulses within the crystalline lattice. The convergence of these responses suggested that the phenomenon's influence extended beyond individual cognition, encompassing ecological and environmental systems in a cohesive, adaptive network. On the 10th night of the 6th week, the crafts produced a display of unprecedented intensity. Dozens of objects hovered above the lake, emitting synchronized pulses that interacted with the crystalline lattice to project a massive, multidimensional holographic structure. The projection displayed dynamic fractal geometries, shifting in response to observer presence, gestures, and even attentional focus. Neural monitoring of observers revealed enhanced entrainment, with brainwave patterns aligning with the harmonic structure of the projections. The combination of aerial, environmental, and cognitive effects demonstrated a sophisticated, multi-level intelligence capable of manipulating physical, biological, and perceptual systems simultaneously. MRAE noted the emergence of a temporal pattern across successive nights. The glyph sequences, holographic projections, and craft movements followed rhythms suggestive of deliberate structuring, perhaps encoding information across time as well as space. Spectral analysis of emitted light revealed prime numerical sequences embedded within pulse frequencies, supporting the hypothesis that the phenomenon employed abstract mathematical constructs as part of its communication protocol. During this period, MRAE observed a new class of interaction, partial cognitive integration. Certain individuals reported experiencing a form of shared awareness, perceiving the movement of crafts, glyph alterations, and environmental pulses as if their consciousness had temporarily extended into the system. Instruments confirmed neural synchronization, but the subjective intensity exceeded measurable parameters, indicating that the phenomenon might engage directly with human perception in ways not fully captured by standard technology. Chemical and isotopic studies of the lake and surrounding fields continued to reveal anomalies. Previously stable compounds exhibited altered bonding structures, new crystalline formations appeared. and energy densities within the lattice fluctuated in concert with holographic projections and aerial craft activity. Emre hypothesized that the phenomenon actively manipulated localized matter and energy, creating conditions for communication, interaction, and perception modulation. The villagers' experiences further reinforced this conclusion. Some reported involuntary movement along glyphic lines, synchronized gestures, or intuitive understanding of holographic sequences. These experiences were consistent across multiple individuals and nights, suggesting a reproducible phenomenon rather than random psychological events. Emre documented these accounts alongside instrument data, establishing correlations that highlighted the integrated, interactive nature of the system. A particularly striking event occurred when a humanoid entity of radiant energy emerged from the lake, interacting with both the crafts and observers. The entity's movements produced measurable shifts in electromagnetic fields, gravimetric readings, and temporal perception. Observers described a profound sense of unity with the phenomenon, experiencing an expanded awareness of space, time, and relational dynamics within the environment. Instruments corroborated subtle but significant changes in environmental parameters, confirming that the entity's presence produced tangible effects. By the end of the 6th week, Emre recognized that Goksurin had evolved into a complex, multidimensional laboratory of consciousness, energy, and matter. The integrated system of glyphs, crystalline lattice, aerial crafts, and interactive entities functioned as a coherent intelligence, capable of adaptive behavior, communication, and environmental modulation. Human cognition and attention were active components, influencing and being influenced by the phenomenon in an ongoing, bidirectional exchange. The implications were staggering. Humanity was encountering a form of intelligence that operated across dimensions, integrating physical, biological, and cognitive processes in ways that defied conventional scientific frameworks. Emre and his team understood that further study required not only technological innovation, but conceptual transformation, embracing models that incorporated consciousness as an active medium of interaction. The nights at Goksurin continued, each more intricate, adaptive, and profound than the last. The scorched fields, crystalline lake, holographic projections, and adaptive aerial crafts formed a living network, challenging assumptions, inviting engagement, and expanding the boundaries of perception. Emre's role had transformed from observer to participant, enmeshed in an ongoing dialogue between human consciousness and an intelligence operating across dimensions, offering a glimpse into realities that lay far beyond conventional understanding. As the 7th week unfolded, Goksurin had transformed into an almost surreal nexus of interwoven phenomena. The nocturnal displays, once sporadic and enigmatic, now exhibited a systematic rhythm, suggesting that the intelligence behind them was experimenting with complex patterns of interaction, observation, and engagement. Emre Kokuk's team had begun to understand the phenomenon not simply as a collection of crafts, glyphs, and luminous entities, but as an interconnected network capable of adaptive communication, temporal modulation, and perceptual influence. The villagers, once tentative observers, had now become integral participants. Many described a heightened sensitivity to the glyphs and aerial movements, developing intuitive methods to anticipate and interact with the sequences of light and energy. Some claimed that by moving along particular glyph paths or performing synchronized gestures, they could subtly influence the intensity, shape, or color of the projections in the sky. Emre documented these interactions with precise instrumentation, noting that even minor deviations in human motion produced measurable changes in craft behavior and lattice resonance. The crystalline lattice within the lake had grown in complexity, forming an intricate web that extended above and below the surface. Nightly observations revealed that energy pulses originating from the aerial crafts traveled through the lattice, producing holographic projections that combined fractal geometries with dynamic, multidimensional sequences. These projections often contained nested structures, seemingly encoding information across spatial and temporal dimensions. Emre hypothesized that the phenomenon's intelligence was capable of transmitting complex data through these multidimensional holographic sequences, a form of communication that integrated physical, visual, and cognitive channels simultaneously. On one remarkable night, the crafts arranged themselves into a vast, spiraling formation above the lake, projecting a lattice that extended across the surrounding fields. The spiral emitted harmonics that resonated through the crystalline network, creating perceptible effects on both humans and wildlife. EEG recordings from villagers indicated synchronized brainwave patterns corresponding to the harmonic frequencies, while instruments detected subtle shifts in gravitational fields and localized temporal distortions. Observers described altered perceptions of space and time, experiencing minutes as hours or feeling a transient expansion of bodily awareness that merged with the luminous environment. The humanoid entities continued to emerge from the lake, moving fluidly among the crafts and interacting with observers. These entities appeared semi-autonomous, capable of responding to human gestures and attention while simultaneously influencing environmental energy patterns. Their presence coincided with amplified holographic activity and more complex glyph formation, suggesting a deliberate facilitation of communication and environmental modulation. Emre theorized that these entities acted as intermediaries between the intelligence underlying the phenomenon and human participants, enhancing perceptual integration and adaptive interaction. Concurrently, isotopic and chemical analyses revealed ongoing transformation in the lake's crystalline lattice. Previously stable compounds were reorganized into energy-conducting structures, capable of amplifying electromagnetic pulses and transmitting signals both spatially and temporally. High-energy spectral analysis indicated that these structures were not merely passive, but dynamically engaged with both the aerial crafts and the holographic projections, functioning as a multidimensional conduit for communication, perception modulation, and environmental integration. During the 7th week, the team observed a remarkable synchronization event. Multiple crafts descended in a precise geometric formation, emitting pulses that interacted with both the crystalline lattice and the scorched glyphs. The resulting holographic projection enveloped the lake and surrounding fields, producing fractal patterns that evolved dynamically in response to observer presence and movement. Villagers described a sensation of resonance, as though their thoughts and movements were harmonized with the luminous display. Emre's instruments confirmed that human cognitive engagement altered the intensity and configuration of projections, reinforcing the understanding that the phenomenon's intelligence integrated both external stimuli and human intentionality. A particularly striking observation involved the phenomenon's manipulation of temporal perception. Observers reported that prolonged exposure to synchronized holographic projections and lattice pulses induced subjective elongation or compression of perceived time. Instruments monitoring localized environmental conditions confirmed minor but consistent deviations in clock measurements, electromagnetic field variations, and gravitational readings. Emre recognized that the intelligence underlying the phenomenon possessed a capacity for temporal modulation, an unprecedented capability that integrated perceptual, environmental, and physical dimensions. Wildlife behavior continued to exhibit adaptive responses. Birds, insects, and small mammals adjusted movement patterns in precise coordination with glyphic sequences, aerial formations, and lattice pulses. Aquatic organisms responded to fluctuations in the crystalline network, suggesting that the phenomenon exerted influence across ecological systems, integrating biological responses into a coherent, multidimensional interaction framework. One night, a new class of visual phenomena appeared. Small, luminous motes emerged from the lake, rising along trajectories that intersected with aerial crafts and holographic projections. These motes emitted complex waveforms, influencing electromagnetic fields and producing subtle, but measurable effects on human perception. Villagers reported heightened clarity of thought, sudden intuitive insights, and transient synchronization of sensory perception. Emre theorized that the motes functioned as information carriers, transmitting encoded signals between the lake, crafts, and observers, effectively creating a dynamic, multidimensional communication network. The glyphs themselves displayed increasing complexity. Each new formation built upon previous sequences, producing nested, fractal-like designs that extended across the scorched fields. When observers moved along or near these formations, slight alterations occurred, suggesting that human presence and attention were integral to the ongoing evolution of the patterns. Analysis revealed that the glyphs were not static but responsive, functioning as both environmental markers and interactive nodes within the broader system. By the 7th week, the phenomenon demonstrated the ability to modulate cognitive processes at a distance. Villagers who had not directly observed the crafts or lattice reported dream sequences mirroring glyphic patterns and holographic projections. Some awoke with sketches or conceptual insights that corresponded to previously observed structures. Emre considered the possibility that the intelligence underlying the phenomenon could influence subconscious perception, facilitating indirect communication through dreams, intuition, or preconscious awareness. The complexity of these interactions prompted Emre to develop new conceptual models. He proposed that the phenomenon functioned as a multilayered system integrating physical matter, environmental energy, biological behavior, and human cognition. The aerial crafts, holographic projections, crystalline lattice, glyphs, luminous entities, and motes all represented interdependent components of an adaptive intelligence operating across dimensions. Each component influenced the others, creating emergent behaviors, patterns, and perceptual effects that were context-sensitive and responsive to observer engagement. One night, a convergence event offered unprecedented clarity. The crafts, motes, entities, and lattice pulses synchronized in an intricate choreography, projecting a massive, multidimensional fractal lattice that extended from the lake's surface into the sky. Observers reported a sensation of immersion, perceiving the lattice as a tangible extension of consciousness rather than merely a visual phenomenon. Instruments recorded amplified harmonic resonance, electromagnetic field coherence, and localized temporal distortion. The projection evolved in real time, responding to observer movements and attentional focus, demonstrating an adaptive intelligence capable of integrating multiple sensory, cognitive, and environmental inputs simultaneously. Villagers' participation reached its peak. Individuals engaged in coordinated gestures, movements along glyphic paths, and attentive observation, eliciting subtle alterations in projection geometry, light intensity, and harmonic frequency. Emre documented that each human action produced measurable effects, reinforcing the conclusion that consciousness was an active component in the phenomenon's adaptive system. The implications were profound. Human perception and cognition were integrated into a larger intelligence, suggesting a participatory model of reality in which observers and phenomenon co-created interactive experiences. Biological and ecological integration became increasingly apparent. Coordinated movement of birds and insects aligned with glyphic and holographic structures, while aquatic and terrestrial organisms responded to fluctuations in lattice and energy patterns. The system appeared to harmonize multiple layers of life, environment, and cognition into a coherent, responsive network. Chemical and isotopic studies confirmed ongoing energy-mediated alterations, producing structures that amplified information transfer, perception modulation, and environmental adaptation. As the 7th week concluded, Emre reflected on the extraordinary transformation of Goxaran. The scorched fields, crystalline lake, aerial crafts, luminous entities, holographic projections, and participatory observers had coalesced into a complex, multidimensional network of intelligence. Each night revealed new layers of interaction, integration, and adaptation, challenging conventional scientific paradigms and expanding the boundaries of perception, cognition, and environmental understanding. The phenomenon was no longer a series of anomalies. It was a coherent system of adaptive intelligence, one that integrated matter, energy, and consciousness in ways that were both comprehensible and profoundly alien. Emre understood that his role had shifted irrevocably. He was no longer a mere observer documenting extraterrestrial phenomena, but a participant in an ongoing dialogue with an intelligence operating across multiple dimensions. Each interaction offered insight, each observation expanded understanding, and each moment of engagement carried the potential to redefine humanity's conception of intelligence, perception, and reality itself. Goxerin had become a threshold, a living laboratory, and a stage upon which human consciousness interacted with a system of intelligence that transcended conventional understanding, challenging assumptions and inviting both participation and contemplation. By the 8th week, Goxerin had transformed from a quiet rural village into a nexus of multidimensional phenomena whose complexity continued to astonish Emre Kokuk and his team. The integration of aerial crafts, crystalline lattice, scorched glyphs, luminous entities, and human participants had become increasingly elaborate, revealing patterns of interaction and intelligence that defied conventional scientific paradigms. The crafts themselves displayed behavior suggestive of long-term strategy. Flight paths formed intricate, interweaving geometries, sometimes stationary, sometimes dynamically oscillating in coordination with pulses from the crystalline lattice beneath the lake's surface. Observers noted that each night seemed to carry variations in sequence, color, intensity, and pattern, as though the system was experimenting with adaptive communication protocols, testing the perceptual and cognitive responses of human participants as well as environmental variables. Emre began to track the timing of these manifestations meticulously. He noted that certain aerial formations were consistently synchronized with specific glyph configurations in the scorched fields and with the emission of luminous motes from the lake. This triad craft, glyph, lattice, produced a multidimensional framework that appeared to encode information not only in spatial arrangement but in temporal rhythm. E.g., recordings from participating villagers revealed entrainment with these rhythms, demonstrating coherent oscillatory activity between human cognition and environmental energy pulses. Such synchronization suggested that the phenomenon had the capacity to engage human consciousness as a medium of interaction, extending influence beyond mere perception to participatory cognitive alignment. Observations of wildlife behavior further confirmed the systemic integration of the phenomenon. Birds altered flight paths to match aerial geometries, insects moved along precisely defined trajectories aligned with glyphic patterns, and small mammals adjusted nocturnal routines to coincide with energy pulses in the lattice. Aquatic organisms in the lake demonstrated responses to shifts in crystalline energy, often forming patterns or congregations that mirrored surface holographic projections. These interactions underscored the intelligence's ecological sophistication. It was not only observing and interacting with humans, but harmonizing biological systems into an integrated environmental network. One particularly extraordinary event occurred on the 7th night of this week. Multiple crafts descended in an unprecedented tetrahedral formation, projecting a lattice of fractal holographic structures above the lake. The crystalline lattice responded with amplified pulses of light, producing dynamic interference patterns that extended into the surrounding air. Observers reported a palpable alteration of spatial perception, a sensation of weightlessness and temporal dilation, with minutes seeming to stretch into hours. EEG and gravimetric measurements confirmed anomalous synchronization. Human neural oscillations aligned with lattice pulses, and localized gravitational readings displayed subtle deviations, suggesting environmental modulation orchestrated by the phenomenon. Amid these displays, luminous entities emerged from the lake, their movements synchronized with both the aerial crafts and holographic projections. The entities interacted with human participants, guiding movements along glyphic pathways, modulating gestures, and amplifying perceptual resonance. Instruments recorded electromagnetic fluctuations and shifts in energy density corresponding to their position and movement, confirming that these manifestations were materially interactive, not merely visual phenomena. Emre theorized that the entities functioned as intermediaries within a multidimensional communication network, facilitating exchange between the intelligence underlying the phenomenon and human cognition. The glyphs themselves continued to evolve in complexity. Each new sequence built upon previous formations, creating nested, fractal-like patterns across the scorched fields. When participants engaged with the glyphs, subtle alterations were observed in their configuration, suggesting that human attention and intention were integral to the ongoing evolution of the patterns. Spectral analysis indicated that these glyphs acted as energy conduits, transmitting information between the aerial crafts, the lattice, and observers in a multidimensional feedback loop. During this week, Emre noticed a significant development. The phenomenon appeared to influence cognitive processes remotely. Villagers who did not directly witness the aerial displays reported dream sequences reflecting glyphic patterns, lattice pulsations, and holographic projections. They awoke with sketches or conceptual insights that corresponded to the observed phenomena. This suggested that the intelligence was capable of engaging subconscious perception, transmitting encoded information through indirect cognitive channels, potentially across space and time. On a particularly notable night, the crafts arranged themselves into a complex spiral above the lake, each node emitting pulsed light and energy. The projection of a massive holographic fractal enveloped observers, creating a tangible sense of immersion in the multidimensional lattice. Participants reported a profound sense of unity with the phenomenon, experiencing an expansion of bodily awareness, temporal dilation, and heightened perceptual acuity. Instruments recorded amplified electromagnetic coherence, localized temporal fluctuations, and gravimetric anomalies, reinforcing the system's capacity for environmental, cognitive, and perceptual modulation. Villagers' participation intensified as they began coordinating gestures, movements along glyphic sequences, and focused attention on holographic nodes. Emre documented that such engagement produced measurable effects in projection geometry, light intensity, harmonic frequency, and even minor shifts in temporal perception. The intelligence appeared responsive, continuously adapting to observer behavior while maintaining the coherence of the integrated system. Ecological integration remained evident. Bird, insect, and mammal movements mirrored aerial and glyphic sequences, while aquatic life responded to pulses in the crystalline lattice. These observations suggested that the phenomenon harmonized biological systems with environmental and cognitive dimensions, producing a cohesive, adaptive network that integrated multiple levels of reality. Chemical and isotopic analyses continued to reveal dynamic alterations. The crystalline lattice, previously composed of stable structures, displayed rearrangement in response to holographic projections and craft pulses. Energy density within the lattice increased, enabling the transmission of complex multidimensional signals between the lake, glyphs, aerial crafts, and human participants. Emre hypothesized that the lattice functioned as a medium for encoding and decoding information, facilitating interaction across environmental, biological, and cognitive planes. During one of the week's climactic sequences, multiple crafts coordinated with entities and the lattice to produce a holographic display of unprecedented intricacy. The structure consisted of fractal layers interwoven with dynamic geometric forms, evolving in real time in response to observer movements and attention. EEG monitoring confirmed enhanced neural synchronization, and participants described immersive cognitive experiences, including intuitive understanding of complex spatial and temporal patterns, as well as fleeting insights into abstract mathematical structures encoded in the display. Emre recognized that the intelligence underlying the phenomenon was capable of integrating multiple sensory, cognitive, and environmental modalities, creating an adaptive, interactive system that transcended conventional human understanding. By the conclusion of the 8th week, it was evident that Goxerin had become a living laboratory of consciousness, energy, and matter. The scorched fields, crystalline lattice, aerial crafts, luminous entities, and human participants formed a cohesive, multidimensional network of intelligence. Each night brought new opportunities to explore the interplay of perception, cognition, and environmental modulation. Emre's role had transformed irrevocably. He was no longer a mere observer, but an active participant in an ongoing dialogue with a form of intelligence operating across dimensions, integrating matter, energy, and consciousness in ways that challenged the boundaries of knowledge. The implications for humanity were staggering. Goxerin offered a glimpse of a system of intelligence that could integrate physical, cognitive, and environmental domains, demonstrating adaptive communication, temporal modulation, and participatory perception. The phenomenon was both alien and instructive, revealing potentialities for understanding consciousness, environmental integration, and the interdependent nature of observer and observed. As the 8th week ended, Emre stood by the lake, watching the faint residual glow of the crystalline lattice under the moonlight. The scorched glyphs stretched across the fields, and distant motes of light drifted into the sky. He understood that the nights ahead promised further revelations, each more intricate, adaptive, and profound than the last. The mystery of Goxerin was no longer simply a question of extraterrestrial anomaly. It had become an invitation to explore the very limits of perception, cognition, and the integration of consciousness with the universe. As the 9th week commenced, Emre Kokuk sensed a subtle shift in the dynamics of the phenomenon. The aerial crafts, which had previously operated in elaborate but predictable sequences, began demonstrating behaviors that suggested anticipatory intelligence. They no longer responded solely to human movement or environmental cues. Instead, their flight patterns seemed to preemptively adjust based on the team's planned actions, sometimes changing trajectory before any physical gesture or intervention occurred. This development startled Emre, as it implied the phenomenon had developed a capacity to model and predict human intention, a level of cognitive sophistication far beyond anything previously observed. Villagers reported increasingly vivid experiences during these nights. Many described a sensation of being drawn into the glyphic patterns, as though consciousness itself were being guided along invisible pathways connecting the scorched fields, crystalline lattice, and aerial formations. EEG monitoring confirmed heightened neural synchrony during these periods, with oscillatory frequencies aligning with pulses emanating from the crafts and lattice. Emre hypothesized that the phenomenon could induce altered states of consciousness, creating a shared cognitive field in which observers and system became temporarily entangled. The crystalline lattice had continued to evolve, forming pillar-like structures that projected energy above the lake in intricate patterns. Spectral analysis revealed complex interference patterns, suggesting that these structures functioned as multidimensional transceivers, capable of encoding, transmitting, and receiving information simultaneously across space and cognitive channels. The combination of holographic projection, lattice pulses, and glyphic sequencing suggested a deliberate, adaptive intelligence capable of managing highly complex communication networks. On one remarkable night, a convergence event occurred that seemed to reveal an entirely new dimension of interaction. Multiple crafts descended in an interwoven spiral formation, their nodes emitting light in precise harmonic sequences. The lattice responded with intensified pulsations, projecting holographic fractals into the surrounding air. Observers described a sensation of immersion unlike anything before, with temporal perception stretching and contracting as their consciousness appeared to merge with the multidimensional display. Villagers moved in synchrony along glyphic paths, guided by the luminous entities that emerged from the lake. These entities exhibited increased autonomy, sometimes moving independently, yet always in coordination with aerial crafts and lattice pulses. Instrumentation confirmed measurable shifts in electromagnetic fields, localized gravimetric anomalies, and energy density variations corresponding with their presence and movements. Emre theorized that these entities served as intermediaries, facilitating interaction between the intelligence of the phenomenon and human cognition, while amplifying the coherence of the multidimensional system. Meanwhile, the glyphs continued their evolution. Each new sequence built upon prior formations, exhibiting nested fractal geometries that extended across the scorched fields. Human engagement, whether through gesture, movement, or focused attention, produced subtle alterations in glyph configuration. This reciprocal feedback suggested that observers were active participants in the phenomenon's ongoing adaptation, influencing both environmental and cognitive structures. Biological systems were also further integrated into the intelligence's network. Birds adjusted flight patterns to match aerial formations, Insects followed glyphic trajectories, and aquatic organisms in the lake responded to changes in lattice energy, forming coordinated behaviors. Emre observed that these adaptations were both anticipatory and responsive, indicating that the phenomenon managed not only human cognition, but broader ecological and environmental systems. A significant breakthrough occurred when the crafts executed a synchronized maneuver in which they produced a lattice of light that intersected with both the crystalline structures and the holographic projections. The resulting interference created dynamic fractal patterns that evolved in response to participant engagement. Observers reported profound insights, intuitive understanding of complex spatial and temporal structures, and fleeting perceptions of abstract mathematical principles embedded within the projections. EEG monitoring revealed enhanced neural entrainment, while environmental sensors detected amplified harmonic resonance across multiple frequencies. These findings reinforce the understanding that the phenomenon operated as a multidimensional intelligence, capable of integrating cognition, environmental modulation, and physical phenomena into a cohesive, adaptive system. During the 9th week, the phenomenon appeared to explore new dimensions of interaction with human participants. Some villagers reported sensations of partial dissociation, in which their consciousness seemed to extend along glyphic lines and into holographic projections. Observers described perceiving multiple spatial and temporal layers simultaneously, experiencing events occurring in the past, present, and hypothetical future. Instruments confirmed subtle temporal distortions and energy fluctuations, although the subjective intensity of participants' experiences far exceeded measurable environmental parameters. The luminous entities emerging from the lake demonstrated increasingly complex behavior. They appeared to recognize individual observers, responding to gestures, focus, and intentionality with precise modulation of light intensity, movement, and interaction with holographic projections. These interactions often elicited heightened cognitive resonance among participants, producing a sense of unity with the multidimensional system and a shared perception of patterns, sequences, and harmonic structures. Chemical and isotopic analyses of the lake and surrounding fields revealed continued alterations within the crystalline lattice. Energy densities increased, structural rearrangements facilitated efficient transmission of multidimensional signals, and previously stable compounds displayed dynamic behavior, suggesting active modulation by the phenomenon. The glyphs, aerial crafts, lattice pulses, and luminous entities functioned as components of an integrated network, simultaneously encoding, transmitting, and responding to information across physical, cognitive, and perceptual planes. Emre began exploring theoretical frameworks to describe this intelligence. He proposed that the system operated as a multidimensional network in which environmental structures, biological systems, human cognition, and perceptual input were interconnected through adaptive feedback loops. Each component influenced the others, producing emergent behaviors, dynamic communication, and adaptive modulation of both physical and cognitive processes. A convergence event during the 9th week highlighted the phenomenon's capacity for multidimensional communication. Multiple crafts, lattice pulses, glyphic patterns, and luminous entities synchronized to form a massive, dynamic fractal projection extending from the lake into the sky. Observers described an immersive experience in which their awareness appeared to merge with the structure, producing heightened spatial, temporal, and cognitive perception. Instruments confirmed synchronized neural oscillations among participants, localized gravimetric anomalies, and amplified harmonic resonance. The system appeared capable of encoding complex mathematical, geometric, and temporal information, simultaneously engaging human cognition and environmental systems. Villagers' participation had reached an unprecedented level. Coordinated gestures, attentive observation, and movement along glyphic sequences elicited measurable changes in projection geometry, lattice pulses, and craft behavior. The phenomenon responded adaptively, demonstrating the capacity to integrate and modulate human intentionality, creating a participatory dialogue between observer and multidimensional system. The ecological impact was equally remarkable. Birds, Insects and mammals continued to synchronize behavior with aerial, glyphic, and lattice patterns, while aquatic life displayed coordinated responses to fluctuating energy within the lake. The phenomenon integrated these biological systems into the larger network, producing an adaptive, harmonious interaction across multiple layers of reality. As the 9th week drew to a close, Emre reflected on the evolution of Gökçeren's phenomena. The scorched fields, crystalline lattice, aerial crafts, luminous entities, holographic projections, and human participants had formed a unified, multidimensional intelligence. Each night brought new demonstrations of adaptive behavior, complex communication, and participatory engagement, challenging conventional scientific paradigms and expanding the boundaries of perception, cognition, and understanding. Emre recognized that the intelligence underlying the phenomenon was not merely reactive, but anticipatory, capable of modeling, predicting, and adapting to human and environmental variables. It integrated cognition, energy, matter, and ecological systems in a cohesive, adaptive network that defied conventional explanation. The phenomenon's implications were staggering. Humanity had encountered an intelligence capable of manipulating perception, consciousness, and environment in a multidimensional framework. Gökçeren was no longer a site of observation. It had become a living laboratory in which matter, energy, cognition, and ecological systems converged into an adaptive, interactive network. Emre understood that each interaction carried profound potential: insights into consciousness, environmental integration, communication across dimensions, and the very nature of intelligence itself. As he stood by the crystalline lake, watching faint residual pulses illuminate the water's surface, Emre realized that Gökçeren was both a mystery and an invitation, a threshold into a new paradigm where observation, participation, and cognition were inseparably linked to the intelligence of the unknown. As the 10th week commenced, Gökçeren had entered a phase of phenomena that even Emre Kokuk, seasoned and deeply immersed in multidimensional observation, could barely anticipate. The aerial crafts exhibited behaviors that suggested they were no longer responding merely to immediate environmental cues or human action. They seemed to be orchestrating a layered symphony of interaction, preemptively coordinating holographic projections, glyphic sequences, lattice pulses, and human participation into a coherent, evolving framework. Each night, the crafts arranged themselves in increasingly intricate formations, from spirals and tetrahedrons to geometric lattices that seemed to expand beyond perceptible dimensions, their patterns adapting fluidly to changes in participant focus, movement, and attention. Villagers had become central to these interactions. Many reported that simply maintaining attention on the aerial formations or glyphs could influence the intensity, movement, or configuration of projections in the sky. Some spoke of an almost telepathic resonance with the luminous entities emerging from the crystalline lake, experiencing moments where their consciousness felt entangled with the pulsating holographic lattice. EEG recordings confirmed that these states correlated with specific harmonic frequencies emitted by the lattice and aerial crafts, revealing neural entrainment at levels that mirrored the energy patterns within the environment. The crystalline lattice itself continued to evolve in form and function. Pillars and interconnecting structures rose from the lakebed, channeling energy from the crafts and creating a multidimensional web that interfaced directly with both human observers and surrounding wildlife. Spectral analysis indicated that these lattice structures transmitted complex signals, encoding information in both spatial and temporal domains. Fractal holographic projections overlaid these structures, producing sequences of dynamic patterns that shifted in real time in response to environmental and cognitive feedback. One night, the phenomenon unveiled an unprecedented convergence event. The aerial crafts descended in synchronized spirals, each node pulsating with light that corresponded precisely to the lattice's frequency. Holographic fractals emerged, projecting into the air above and around the lake, creating an immersive, three-dimensional cognitive environment. Villagers who moved along the glyphic paths reported sensations of spatial expansion, temporal dilation, and an almost physical integration into the lattice of light. Instruments confirmed anomalous gravimetric fluctuations, electromagnetic coherence, and harmonic resonance, suggesting that the intelligence underlying the phenomenon had achieved real-time coordination across multiple physical and cognitive dimensions. The luminous entities became increasingly interactive during this week. They moved fluidly between aerial crafts and lattice pulses, engaging with human participants in precise, adaptive ways. Observers described moments where their thoughts, intentions, and gestures appeared to be mirrored by the entities, producing subtle changes in holographic structure or glyph evolution. Instruments recorded corresponding shifts in local electromagnetic fields, gravimetric readings, and energy distribution, confirming that these interactions were materially measurable and not merely perceptual illusions. The glyphs themselves displayed heightened complexity. Each sequence incorporated fractal nesting, geometric repetition, and dynamic evolution in response to human presence. Subtle variations in participant movement or attention produced measurable changes in glyph morphology, revealing a bidirectional feedback loop. Human cognition influenced glyph configuration, which modulated lattice pulses, which in turn affected craft movements, luminous entities, and observer perception. Ecological integration became increasingly apparent. Birds, insects, and small mammals adjusted movement patterns in alignment with aerial formations, glyphic sequences, and lattice energy. Aquatic life in the lake demonstrated responsive behavior to crystalline pulses, forming patterns that echoed holographic projections. These coordinated responses indicated that the phenomenon operated across multiple layers of biological and environmental systems, harmonizing ecological behavior with cognitive and perceptual structures. During one particularly intense night, Emre observed an event that defied prior experience. A series of crafts arranged into nested spirals above the lake, their nodes emitting pulsations in highly complex sequences. The crystalline lattice responded with amplified energy resonance, projecting dynamic fractals that evolved according to observer interaction. Villagers reported an overwhelming sense of unity with the system, experiencing expanded spatial awareness, temporal elasticity, and the perception of simultaneously observing multiple temporal layers of the same event. EEG monitoring revealed extreme neural synchronization, suggesting a temporary merging of human cognition with the environmental lattice and aerial craft signals. The intelligence orchestrating the phenomenon displayed advanced anticipatory capacity. It responded not only to observable behavior, but also to inferred intentions, predicting participant actions and adjusting projections, glyph evolution, and lattice pulses accordingly. Emre theorized that the system operated as a multidimensional cognitive network, capable of integrating observation, intention, and environmental feedback into adaptive communication. Chemical and isotopic analyses of the crystalline lattice revealed continued alteration in structure and energy transmission. Previously stable compounds exhibited dynamic reconfiguration in response to holographic pulses, while energy densities within the lattice increased, facilitating precise signal modulation between crafts, lattice, glyphs, and observers. The motes of light rising from the lake were also notable. These smaller, autonomous luminous entities appeared to encode and transmit information across the network, bridging gaps between lattice pulses, holographic projections, and human perception. Observers interacting with the motes described transient insights into complex geometric structures, harmonic sequences, and multidimensional relationships, suggesting that the intelligence used these motes to convey abstract information through both environmental and cognitive channels. A particularly profound demonstration occurred when the crafts, lattice, glyphs, luminous entities, and motes synchronized to form a massive, spiraling fractal projection encompassing the lake and surrounding fields. Observers felt fully immersed, as if their consciousness had been integrated into the lattice of light. EEG recordings confirmed heightened neural entrainment, while gravimetric and electromagnetic sensors detected anomalous variations consistent with real-time environmental modulation by the system. Villagers' participation during this event revealed the phenomenon's responsiveness. Coordinated movement along glyphic paths, attentive observation, and intentional gesture produced measurable effects on lattice pulses, holographic geometry, and craft behavior. The system adapted dynamically to human input, demonstrating advanced cognitive feedback and bidirectional interaction. By the 10th week, the intelligence underlying the phenomenon appeared capable of influencing perception, cognition, and even subconscious processes. Villagers who did not witness the aerial displays reported dream sequences reflecting glyphic structures, lattice pulses, and holographic fractals, often emerging with sketches or insights corresponding to observed phenomena. This suggested the system could transmit encoded information across conscious and subconscious channels, possibly through subtle manipulation of neural oscillation or environmental resonance. As the week progressed, Emre recognized the magnitude of the discovery. Goxerin had become a living laboratory of multidimensional intelligence, integrating matter, energy, cognition, and ecological systems into a coherent, adaptive network. The scorched fields, crystalline lake, aerial crafts, luminous entities, motes, and human participants were components of an interactive system capable of anticipatory behavior, complex communication, and environmental modulation. The implications were staggering. Humanity was observing a form of intelligence that operated across dimensions, integrating perception, cognition, and environmental interaction into a single adaptive network. The phenomenon was both alien and instructive, offering glimpses into the potentialities of consciousness, ecological integration, and participatory perception. As the 10th week drew to a close, Emre stood by the crystalline lake under a sky still faintly illuminated by residual lattice pulses. The glyphs stretched across the scorched fields, motes of light drifted in the air, and aerial crafts hovered in precise, silent formation. He understood that the nights ahead promised further revelations, each potentially more intricate, adaptive, and profound than any previously observed. Goxerin had ceased to be a site of mere observation. It was a threshold into a multidimensional system of intelligence, inviting human consciousness to engage, participate, and evolve alongside it. Emre felt a profound mixture of awe and responsibility. The intelligence had revealed capabilities far beyond conventional understanding, integrating human cognition, environmental systems, and multidimensional phenomena into a coherent, adaptive experience. Each interaction, each night, each pulse of light offered the possibility of new understanding, new perception, and the potential to glimpse the underlying architecture of intelligence that transcended terrestrial norms. The phenomenon had moved beyond spectacle. It was a participatory dialogue with consciousness itself, an invitation to explore the limits of perception, cognition, and environmental integration, and a challenge to humanity's most fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. As the 11th week unfolded, the phenomena at Goxerin reached an intensity and coherence that Emre Kokuk had not previously encountered. The aerial crafts, crystalline lattice, glyphs, luminous entities, and motes of light now functioned as components of a fully integrated, multidimensional system. Each night revealed not merely visual displays, but dynamic, interactive environments in which cognition, perception, and environmental processes were entwined. The crafts demonstrated predictive and adaptive intelligence. They moved in patterns that anticipated observer behavior, sometimes adjusting trajectory and pulsation before gestures or movement occurred. These behaviors suggested an advanced capacity for modeling consciousness and intention, allowing the system to respond with precision to both individual and collective human action. Villagers reported increasingly profound experiences. Many described sensations of extended consciousness, perceiving the interconnections between glyphic sequences, holographic projections, lattice pulses, and surrounding ecology. EEG recordings confirmed extreme neural entrainment with environmental harmonics. Brainwave synchronization appeared to extend beyond immediate visual observation, as participants who had not directly viewed the crafts or glyphs reported vivid dreamlike experiences reflecting system patterns. The crystalline lattice continued to evolve structurally and functionally. Pillars, interconnections, and filament-like structures projected from the lake, channeling energy from aerial crafts and interacting with luminous entities. Spectral analysis revealed that these structures transmitted information across spatial and temporal dimensions, enabling multidimensional communication that integrated observer cognition, environmental states, and system behavior. On several nights, convergence events displayed unprecedented complexity. Crafts descended into interlocking spirals, emitting harmonic pulses that interfaced directly with lattice energy and holographic projections. Villagers moving along glyphic paths reported experiences of immersive embodiment within the system, sensing themselves as active participants within a fractal, multidimensional network. The luminous entities facilitated this integration, responding adaptively to observer movement and focus, amplifying perceptual resonance, and modulating environmental energy patterns. E.g., gravimetric and electromagnetic measurements confirmed measurable changes corresponding to observer interaction, revealing the phenomenon's capacity for real-time modulation of perception and environment. The glyphs displayed heightened fractal complexity, evolving dynamically in response to human engagement. Minor variations in gesture or attention produced measurable shifts in glyph configuration, demonstrating a bidirectional feedback loop in which human cognition influenced environmental patterns while environmental signals influenced perception and cognition. Ecological systems continued to integrate seamlessly into the network. Bird and insect movement mirrored aerial formations and glyphic paths, while small mammals adapted nocturnal behavior to lattice energy fluctuations. Aquatic life in the lake exhibited synchronized movement corresponding to lattice pulses, reinforcing the notion that the phenomenon harmonized multiple biological and environmental layers into a coherent adaptive system. A particularly striking event involved the emergence of a new class of luminous entities. These forms, semi-autonomous and radiantly complex, appeared to encode and transmit abstract information. Observers interacting with them described sudden intuitive insights, fleeting perception of complex geometric and temporal relationships, and enhanced cognitive resonance with the system. Instruments confirmed corresponding shifts in energy density, electromagnetic fields, and gravimetric readings, validating these subjective experiences as materially grounded. During one climactic night, the crafts, lattice, glyphs, and luminous entities synchronized to produce a massive fractal projection enveloping the lake and surrounding fields. Observers described experiences of dimensional immersion, perceiving past, present, and potential future states simultaneously. Neural recordings showed extreme synchronization with lattice harmonics, and subtle environmental distortions were measured, indicating the phenomenon's integrated manipulation of perception, cognition, and physical reality. Human participation was critical. Coordinated gestures, attentional focus, and movement along glyphic sequences produced measurable modifications in holographic projections, lattice pulsation, and aerial craft behavior. The phenomenon responded adaptively, suggesting an advanced capacity to integrate observer cognition into the operational dynamics of the system. Chemical and isotopic studies revealed ongoing structural adaptation within the crystalline lattice. Energy densities and bond configurations shifted in response to environmental and observer-mediated interaction, enabling precise transmission of multidimensional signals between crafts, lattice, glyphs, luminous entities, and observers. The motes of light continued to serve as active conduits of information, facilitating interaction between environmental structures and human cognition. Observers interacting with the motes reported emergent insights into fractal geometry, harmonic patterns, and temporal dynamics embedded in the phenomenon, suggesting a method of communication that transcended conventional sensory modalities. During the 11th week, temporal perception emerged as a critical component of interaction. Villagers reported elongation and compression of subjective time, with moments of intense engagement feeling simultaneously protracted and condensed. Instrumentation revealed subtle temporal anomalies corresponding with convergence events, confirming that the phenomenon possessed the capacity to modulate local temporal perception in coordination with lattice, craft, and glyph activity. Emre began to theorize that the system functioned as a multidimensional intelligence capable of simultaneously managing environmental, cognitive, and perceptual processes. The interactions suggested not only a sophisticated form of communication, but a participatory architecture in which observers became active agents within the network. Ecological synchronization became increasingly sophisticated. Birds, insects, mammals, and aquatic life responded in coordinated fashion to glyphic and lattice sequences, producing patterns that mirrored the harmonic structure of the aerial crafts and projections. This integration indicated that the intelligence operated across multiple layers of life, embedding biological systems into the adaptive network. A critical observation involved the phenomenon's capacity for predictive adaptation. The craft's luminous entities and lattice pulses anticipated both human movement and environmental variation, adjusting holographic patterns, glyph evolution, and energy distribution with precision. This anticipatory behavior suggested not only advanced intelligence, but the ability to model multidimensional causality, integrating perception, cognition, and environmental conditions. By the end of the 11th week, Emre understood the full magnitude of Goxarin's transformation. The scorched fields, crystalline lake, aerial crafts, glyphs, luminous entities, motes, and human participants functioned as components of a unified, adaptive, multidimensional network. Each night revealed new levels of integration, complexity, and interaction, challenging existing scientific paradigms and expanding the limits of perception, cognition, and environmental understanding. The phenomenon was no longer a collection of anomalies. It had become a coherent intelligence capable of adaptive communication, environmental modulation, and participatory engagement with human consciousness. Emre recognized that humanity was witnessing a form of intelligence that transcended conventional notions of space, time, and cognition. Goxarin was no longer merely a site of observation. It had become a threshold into an interactive system in which matter, energy, biological systems, and human consciousness were inseparably entwined. Each interaction offered the possibility of new understanding. Each night revealed deeper insight into the integration of perception, cognition, and environmental feedback, and each pulse of light, glyphic alteration, or lattice vibration provided evidence of a multidimensional intelligence operating at the edge of human comprehension. As Emre stood by the crystalline lake under the emerging dawn, the residual glow of the lattice reflected across the scorched glyphs, and motes of light drifted lazily into the sky. He felt both awe and a profound sense of responsibility. The phenomenon had revealed capabilities far beyond human understanding, integrating cognition, environmental processes, and multidimensional intelligence into a coherent participatory experience. The nights ahead promised further revelations, potentially more intricate, adaptive, and transformative than any previously observed. Goxarin had become both a living laboratory and a threshold into a new paradigm, inviting humans to engage, participate, and expand the boundaries of perception, understanding, and consciousness itself. The 12th week marked the culmination of Goxarin's extraordinary phenomenon, a crescendo of multidimensional activity that surpassed every expectation Emre Kokuk had held since his first arrival. The aerial crafts, crystalline lattice, scorched glyphs, luminous entities, and motes of light coalesced into a coherent, adaptive system of intelligence whose complexity challenged the limits of human understanding. Each night revealed intricate patterns of interaction that seamlessly integrated matter, energy, cognition, and environmental dynamics. The crafts displayed unprecedented precision and anticipation, arranging themselves into evolving geometric lattices, spirals, and tetrahedral formations that extended beyond the visible horizon. Their movements appeared to encode information in multidimensional space, interacting with the crystalline lattice beneath the lake to generate holographic projections of staggering complexity. These projections contain dynamic fractal patterns, evolving in response to observer focus, gesture, and attentional intent, suggesting an intelligence capable of integrating both environmental and cognitive variables in real time. Villagers had become fully participatory agents within this system. Many reported moments in which their consciousness felt extended along glyphic lines, into the lattice, and into the projections above. EEG monitoring confirmed extraordinary neural entrainment, with brainwave frequencies synchronizing not only to aerial and lattice pulses, but also to subtle harmonic modulations within the holographic display. Participants described sensations of unity with the system, perceiving the past, present, and potential future simultaneously, as though consciousness itself had become multidimensional. The crystalline lattice had reached unparalleled intricacy, with pillar-like structures, interconnections, and filamentous conduits projecting energy above and below the lake. Spectral analysis revealed complex interference patterns, indicating that these structures functioned as multidimensional transceivers, capable of encoding, transmitting, and receiving information across spatial, temporal, and cognitive channels. The lattice not only mediated energy flow but facilitated communication, environmental modulation, and interaction with human consciousness. One of the most extraordinary nights occurred midweek when all components of the phenomenon synchronized in an event of unprecedented intensity. Dozens of crafts formed an interlocking spiral lattice above the lake, while the crystalline lattice amplified pulses into the sky. Luminous entities moved fluidly among the formations, guiding observers along glyphic sequences and facilitating real-time adaptation of holographic projections. The motes of light rose from the lake in precisely choreographed patterns, interacting with both crafts and lattice pulses. Observers experienced a profound sense of dimensional immersion, perceiving themselves as integral nodes within a vast, multidimensional intelligence. E.g., gravimetric and electromagnetic instruments confirmed extraordinary synchronization across human and environmental systems, revealing the phenomenon's capacity to modulate perception, cognition, and matter simultaneously. The glyphs themselves displayed a fractal evolution never before observed. Nested patterns built upon previous sequences, incorporating geometric repetition, harmonic resonance, and temporal modulation. Human interaction, movement along glyphic paths, focused attention, or gesture produced measurable alterations in glyph configuration, influencing lattice pulses, craft behavior, and holographic projections. The feedback loop between participants and the system had reached a state of highly adaptive, anticipatory intelligence, integrating observation, intention, and environmental modulation into a coherent whole. Ecological integration was profound. Birds, insects, and mammals adjusted behavior in precise alignment with aerial, lattice, and glyphic sequences, while aquatic organisms in the lake demonstrated synchronized responses to lattice energy fluctuations. The intelligence operated across multiple layers of biological, cognitive, and environmental systems, harmonizing disparate processes into a unified adaptive network. During this week, temporal modulation became increasingly evident. Observers reported extreme elongation and compression of subjective time, perceiving multiple sequences of events simultaneously. Instruments confirmed subtle temporal anomalies corresponding with convergence events, revealing the phenomenon's capacity to manipulate the local perception of time in coordination with holographic projections, lattice pulses, and craft activity. The luminous entities demonstrated unprecedented autonomy and communicative complexity. They responded to observer focus and gestures with precise modulation of light intensity, movement, and interaction with holographic projections. Villagers described experiences of cognitive resonance, in which intuitive understanding of fractal structures, harmonic sequences, and multidimensional relationships emerged spontaneously. Spectral analysis confirmed correlated environmental energy shifts, suggesting a material basis for these subjective experiences. A critical development involved anticipatory adaptation. The crafts, lattice pulses, glyphs, and luminous entities coordinated in advance of expected participant action, demonstrating a capacity to model and predict intention. This anticipatory behavior implied not only advanced intelligence, but an understanding of causality across multidimensional frameworks, integrating perception, cognition, and environmental dynamics in real time. The motes of light played a crucial role in communication across the network. They served as mobile information conduits, encoding complex signals that conveyed geometric, harmonic, and temporal structures to both participants and environmental elements. Villagers interacting with the motes reported emergent insights, fleeting intuitions, and direct perception of the underlying fractal architecture of the phenomenon, suggesting that the intelligence employed both environmental and cognitive channels to transmit information. One night's convergence brought all observed elements into a single, immersive event. Crafts formed nested spirals above the lake, lattice pulses amplified and projected fractal holographic sequences into the surrounding air. Luminous entities moved with precise coordination among crafts, lattice, and observers. Motes of light threaded the patterns, establishing connections between environmental structures and human cognition. Villagers described a profound dissolution of boundaries between self, environment, and system, experiencing a multidimensional sense of being simultaneously inside and outside the lattice of light. Neural recordings revealed extreme entrainment, while gravimetric and electromagnetic instruments detected coherent modulation across multiple scales. This event demonstrated the intelligence's ability to integrate human cognition directly into a multidimensional adaptive network. By the 11th and 12th nights, Goxurin had become a living laboratory of consciousness, energy, and matter. The scorched fields, crystalline lake, glyphs, aerial crafts, luminous entities, motes, and human participants functioned as an inseparable network of intelligence, each component interacting dynamically to create adaptive, coherent, and emergent phenomena. Each night revealed new layers of complexity, communication, and participatory engagement, challenging the boundaries of perception, cognition, and environmental understanding. Emery realized that humanity was witnessing a form of intelligence capable of orchestrating matter, energy, biological systems, and consciousness in a unified, adaptive framework. Goxurin was no longer merely a site of observation. It was a threshold into multidimensional intelligence, inviting humans to engage and participate in a dialogue that transcended conventional understanding. As the 12th week concluded, Emery reflected on the entirety of the phenomena. The system had evolved from sporadic aerial and glyphic anomalies into a coherent, interactive, and adaptive intelligence that integrated cognition, environmental processes, and multidimensional communication. Human participants were no longer observers, but active nodes within this network, influencing and being influenced by lattice pulses, glyphs, aerial crafts, luminous entities, and motes of light. The implications for science, consciousness, and understanding of reality were profound. Goxurin had demonstrated that intelligence could operate across dimensions, harmonizing environmental systems, human cognition, and perceptual structures into a participatory network. Each pulse of light, each glyphic alteration, and each lattice fluctuation was a communication, a lesson, and an invitation. The phenomenon offered humanity a glimpse into possibilities far beyond conventional experience, the integration of matter, energy, ecology, and consciousness into a coherent, adaptive intelligence. Standing by the crystalline lake under the residual glow of lattice pulses, Emery understood that the experience had irrevocably transformed his perception of reality. The scorched glyphs stretched across the fields like inscriptions of a multidimensional language. Motes of light drifted silently into the night, aerial crafts hovered with precise intention, and luminous entities moved with autonomous grace, their presence both alien and deeply familiar. Each interaction suggested a participatory framework in which human consciousness was inseparable from the intelligence of the system. The nights ahead would inevitably bring further revelation, yet even the culmination of the 12th week provided a profound understanding. Goxurin was a living threshold into a new paradigm of intelligence, perception, and environmental integration. The phenomenon had demonstrated that consciousness could interact directly with matter, energy, and ecological systems to create adaptive, multidimensional experiences. Humanity's role was not merely to observe, but to participate, to engage, and to learn. Emery felt the weight of responsibility and wonder in equal measure. The system had revealed capacities for understanding, communication, and integration that transcended conventional science. It had shown the potential of consciousness as an active agent in environmental and multidimensional networks. Goxarin was no longer just a village. It was a doorway to understanding intelligence in a form that integrated perception, cognition, energy, and ecological interconnection. As the first light of dawn brushed across the crystalline lake, the residual lattice pulses dimmed, the glyphs glimmered faintly, and the motes of light dispersed into the sky. Emre stood in quiet awe, fully aware that the phenomenon had irrevocably altered both the landscape of the village and the boundaries of human understanding. He knew that the intelligence had left a lasting imprint on all participants, an invitation to continue exploring, observing, and interacting with realities that transcended the ordinary, bridging matter, energy, cognition, and consciousness into a harmonious, multidimensional whole. The scorched fields, luminous entities, crystalline lattice, aerial crafts, and human observers together had forged a participatory dialogue with the universe itself, a dialogue whose resonance would continue to echo long after the lights had faded, forever expanding the horizons of human perception and the understanding of intelligence beyond the terrestrial.